closed down all of those mental institutions?
I don't think we should go back to those days when we had those appalling institutions where we just lock people away and forget about them. And not just mental health people, but autistic people and disabled people. Horrific way to treat individuals. And you know I campaign on that a lot.
I know.
However, I think if we move into a more community-based approach, which can be really good for many, many people who are on the spectrum and on that scale of mental health, we have to remember there will be a small but significant number who will continue to pose a danger.
Okay.
And that's why monitoring is so important.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, it's been revealed that the King is to have weekly phone conversations with the Prime Minister. Buckingham Palace says it will be instead of their regular face-to-face meetings. And where's Harry? Next, the leaked Home Office files, which reveal a crisis in the UK's immigration system, and you'll be absolutely staggered at just how few illegal migrants are expected to be deported under the government's Rwanda plan, if that even ever gets off the ground. And the manhunt continues for chemical attack suspect Abdulazidi. It's been a week of searching now, and why on earth hasn't Britain's most wanted man been caught yet? We'll have an update live from Scotland Yard. And they queued for hours over 3 days just to get a dental appointment. But the practice in Bristol is now turning people away. Can a government's cash offer to dentists help to get more NHS patients treated? What's the real reason for these dentists having queues around the block? Is it the NHS, or could it be something else? That's all coming in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Thanks for your time. Now, as usual, I want to hear from you all the usual ways. gbviews@gbnews.com. Loads of big debates today. Is the Home Office broken? How can we not catch Abdulazidi in a city where you get nicked for dropping a cigarette end? Is it time to deport all foreign criminals? The debate kicks off at 4:30 in the House of Commons. We'll have the Deputy Chair of the Tory Party, James Daly, in for that. We've got Tom Hunt from Ipswich shortly. Get our teeth into all these big debates, but first it's time for your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 3. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer accused the Prime Minister of letting parts of the country go without dental health care as he faced the Prime Minister in the Commons today. It comes as the government announced a new plan to boost the number of dental appointments available across England. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader said 14 years of Conservative government had seen the NHS fall into neglect.
We should follow Labour, scrap the non-dom tax status, use the money to fund 2 million more hospital appointments every year. But, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister is oddly reluctant to follow us on this. What exactly is so special about this tax avoidance scheme that the Prime Minister prioritises it above the NHS?
However, the Prime Minister criticised Labour's plans for the NHS, saying it includes billions of unfunded spending commitments.
Record funding, record doctors and nurses, record number of appointments, higher cancer survival rates. But what's happening under Labour's watch in Wales, Mr Speaker? Let's have a look. A fifth of people in Wales are currently on a waiting list. Waits of 18 months or more are 10 times higher than that in England, and people are waiting twice as long for an operation. Their failure has sent the Welsh NHS back to square one, and will never let them do that here.
Rishi Sunak speaking there. Now, today's PMQs come after the government revealed a plan for dentists to be offered cash incentives to take on new patients. The new scheme aims to make appointments available to around 1 million more people across England. Dentists will be offered payments of between £15 and £50 for each new patient. Hundreds of people endured long waits in Bristol earlier today, with queues seen around the block after a clinic made new appointments available on the NHS. The clinic's manager, Shivani Bandari, told GB News the crowds were overwhelming.
Didn't expect that much crowd on the day one. We had to get the police involved because they were fighting, people were arguing and jumping the queue. And the second day, we had to get the bouncers in on our personal expense because the police could not come in the next day. So the third day, today, we decided we're not going to do any enrollment because we've already enrolled 1,500 people already, and we want to do it in a phased way. We want to actually see those 1,500 patients. It's no point enrolling and not seeing those patients.
Now, Downing Street has confirmed Rishi Sunak will have his weekly audience with the King over the phone, following His Majesty's cancer diagnosis. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales has made his first public appearance since a series of health blows to the royals. He carried out an investiture, a ceremony where he formally hands out state honours at Windsor Castle. Prince William is expected to carry out further royal duties during his father's treatment, along with the Queen and Princess Anne. The mother of a transgender teenager who was murdered last year is due to meet the Labour leader today. Esther Jai was watching in the Commons during this afternoon's Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak was criticised for making a joke about Sir Keir Starmer's position on gender issues. Number 10 declined to apologise for the remark, insisting that it was a legitimate critique of the Labour leader's stance on the definition of a woman. Spanish farmers are blocking major roads with tractors and burning tyres in a protest against bureaucracy and competition from outside the EU. More than a dozen major roads were blocked across Spain this morning as convoys of tractors converged on Barcelona to confront local authorities. It's the latest sign of growing anger across Europe after similar protests in Germany, France, and Belgium in recent weeks. And the right-wing media personality Tucker Carlson is in Moscow and says he plans to record an interview with Vladimir Putin. The former Fox News host announced the interview late yesterday in a short video posted to his website and on social media. He said he plans to expose what he calls lies told by other media about Russia, though he provided no evidence and falsely claimed that other journalists hadn't bothered to try to interview Mr. Putin. It comes as Russia's detention of the American journalist Evan Gershkovich reaches 315 days. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code or on screen, go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Sophia. We've got loads to get stuck into today, so let's get cracking. Now, let's start with an update on the royals following the King's health scare. Downing Street says the King will hold weekly phone conversations with the Prime Minister. And it comes as the monarch rests at his Sandringham estate. Number 10 in Buckingham Palace took the unusual step of confirming details about the weekly call in an attempt to show the King was carrying on with his duties as normal. Meanwhile, Prince William returned to royal duty today after his wife had abdominal operation, and he conducted an investiture at Windsor Palace. We've heard in the last hour that Prince Harry is on his lonely way back to the US after his speedy flying visit to the UK. Well, GB News presenter Pip Thompson is in Windsor with all the latest. Pip, bring us up to speed on the King's recovery.
Good afternoon, Martin. Yeah, I think we just need a little bit of clarification here because what hasn't been confirmed is whether this weekly audience with the Prime Minister over the phone is going to happen indefinitely. What we do know is that today's conversation was happening on the phone, and that came from the Prime Minister's spokesperson. He was asked if Rishi Sunak would travel to Sandringham for his discussion with the King, and they said, "We are not going to get into the habit of commenting on the Prime Minister's conversations with the King, but we have agreed with the Palace in this specific instance to confirm that they will be speaking on the phone later." Now, normally that weekly private audience happens at Buckingham Palace. It happens every Wednesday. They discuss government matters, but of course we don't know any detail about that conversation between them. Now, earlier today, I'm at Windsor Castle because Prince William was back on public duty for the first time in 3 weeks, and of course for the first time since his father, King Charles, was diagnosed with a form of cancer. Prince William was handing out honours, some 50 honours to people from all walks of life, and they included former England footballer Ellen White. And of course there were plenty of people who wanted to send their best wishes to King Charles through his son. So we spoke to Ellen and some other people who were handed their honours by Prince William. He was always due to do this investiture ceremony today. He can do it, Princess Anne can do it alongside King Charles, but it wasn't a case of Prince William stepping in for King Charles. This was always in the diary, and this is what some of the recipients told us.
My best wishes to the King and obviously to Kate as well, to Princess of Wales. But yeah, no, he was lovely, yeah, it was incredible to meet him again, and to obviously for him to give me the MBE. So yeah, it was a very special day.
To have the recognition for the work that Little Hearts Matter does, and amazing to think that people are interested in what the families go through. And we didn't know who we would have, and because everybody's not been around, I was thinking, oh, I wonder who we might get. And so I really hope that King Charles is okay and that the treatment goes well, because I'm medical by background, so it's a tough time for the family. So I hope that goes well, and that the Princess of Wales is getting better as well. It's terribly important.
The realisation now, actually.
So Prince William appreciated everybody's good wishes. We understand that he has now left Windsor Castle, and he is in central London later for a gala dinner for the London Air Ambulance charity. And there he is expected to give a short speech. So everybody will be listening to that to see whether he does make reference to his father, King Charles. Now, out here waiting after the investiture ceremony was a few well-wishers and royal fans as well, and my eye was caught by these two ladies, Anne and Grace. You couldn't miss them because they had a cardboard cutout of King Charles and a balloon bearing get better, get well soon wishes. So I caught up with them for a quick chat. Anne, by the way, she'd come all the way from Cardiff. This is what they had to say.
Hoping to see His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales to offer him support and cheer him on, because everybody adores Catherine, Princess of Wales, and we want to know how she is, and if we get the opportunity, if he comes by on a walkabout, to ask how she is. He's got a lot on his plate at the moment.
We want to give our support to the royal family, those who are ill, and even anybody in the whole world having the same illness or problem, that everyone they should get speedy recovery. So we are here to support them.
So I'm not sure whether they thought King Charles was at Windsor Castle today, but he is some 3 hours away at Sandringham, where he is convalescing between treatments for that form of cancer. And we should also mention his younger son, Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, who we now know has flown into the UK for all of 24 hours. We understood yesterday, didn't we, that he spent maybe just 45 minutes speaking to his father at Clarence House before Prince Charles flew by helicopter to Sandringham. Prince Harry, it's been suggested, spent the night in a luxury London hotel. Well, he has now been spotted back at Heathrow Airport, getting on a flight, that 5,000-mile trip back to California. So he was here for 24 hours and spent some 35 minutes with his father. Of course, a lot of people would say, oh, it's none of our business what happens behind closed doors. But it just does make you wonder, doesn't it, that he spoke to him for such a short period of time and then he flew straight back again. Quite a trip, wasn't it, in 24 hours?
Superb, Pip Thompson. Thank you for that update from Windsor. Just goes to show you, life goes on. The fans are sending their messages, and poor old Harry poodles back to California. Is this just underlining, beg your pardon, his irrelevance in the modern royal family? Now, it's the Home Office in crisis. Well, GB News has an exclusive leaked Home Office document which exposes Britain's broken immigration system. And this comes as reports suggest Catholic and Baptist churches helped Clapham chemical attack suspect Abdul Azidi claim asylum, and yet he still hasn't been found. And you may also remember Nottingham triple killer Valdo Colacane, who brutally killed and stabbed 3 people to death in Nottingham. Well, he entered into the UK legally, and today it's been emerging that he's entitled to claim thousands of pounds in state benefits. You couldn't make it up. Is our system completely broken? And also in the news today, a debate kicks off in about an hour's time. Is it time to deport asylum seeker criminals from the UK? Well, there's lots to get stuck into there. And joining me now in the studio is the Conservative MP for Ipswich, Tom Hunt. Tom, welcome to the studio. Let's start with the Colacane situation, the Vincent Colacane, so Valdo Colacane emerged. He's entitled to £360 a month of benefit. This is the law, but the mother of one of the killed, Emma Webber, Barnaby's mum, saying this may be the law, but we strongly suggest the law is wrong and it urgently needs to be reviewed.
I think she's right. I mean, I think that this is an individual who has killed, murdered, 3 young people. And I think it's this slight discrepancy about whether it's a prison or whether it's got a psychiatric element. Ultimately, I do not think he should be receiving any money at all from a taxpayer. I think he's already abused the trust of a British taxpayer. He's already abused the trust of people of this country. So no, I absolutely share the anger of the mother in question.
Meanwhile, Abdulazidi, I find it astonishing, I don't know about you, Tom, that in a city where you can't even drop a ciggy on the floor without getting a ticket, you can simply vanish into thin air if your name is Abdulazidi. Huge questions being asked after it emerged yesterday about his criminal record, multiple sexual offences, and yet was still granted asylum on the 3rd attempt, of course, after miraculously seeing the light and converting to Christianity. The big question is this, Tom: is the Home Office completely and utterly failing in its duty?
Well, I think there's a number of different elements here. I think that one element is the role of the Archbishop of Canterbury. I think he seems to be very much against any kind of border control. He seems to be pro-open borders. Any attempt to control immigration, he fights and militates against. And a lot of his people follow his leadership within the Church and do exactly the same thing. I think it's deeply concerning, the role of the Church of England in relation to the immigration debate. And in terms of these specific examples we've seen who have been helping people game the system. In terms of the Home Office, the problem is a lot of it is the human rights framework within which we're operating. And I think, frankly, until we make those big changes, I think we're going to continue to struggle. And I do think I have come to a conclusion some time ago, for example, that I think we should leave the European Convention of Human Rights. I think that is, we will eventually end up leaving it. That's my prediction. I'd rather it was sooner rather than later.
I've heard a rumour swirling around Westminster that there could be an attempt to throw that question onto the general election ticket at the same time, as a way of really forcing a point of difference between the Conservatives and the other parties. Is there any merit in this rumour?
So I've actually got quite a niche view on the ECHR. A lot of people think that, because of the magnitude of leaving it, we'd have to put it in a manifesto. We'd sort of potentially even have to have a referendum on it. I just leave it. Ultimately, when it comes to that, having a mandate, when it comes to manifestos, we had a really clear manifesto in 2019 to take back control, to take back control of our borders. And that was in broad headlights. And we've got a mandate of 80 seats to take back control. And if it is the case that the ECHR, amongst other things, is preventing us in our ability to fulfil that democratic mandate, we should simply leave it.
And that brings me on to the next point, the Rwanda files. The GBNews has seen leaked documents from the Home Office. It revealed that only 12% of illegal arrivals would be removed each year in the best case scenario. This is the systemic attempt to derail Rwanda, to prevent the flights getting off the ground. Who's responsible?
Look, I think that the most depressing thing is that the Rwanda scheme hasn't been given a chance to work. I continue to believe wholeheartedly, if you got flights off at scale to Rwanda and potentially other safe third countries, and I think others would fall into line after, if Rwanda was seen to work, I think we could get other agreements with other countries. I think it would provide a deterrent. It would have a major impact in terms of the number of people trying to get here. But the problem is, until that deterrent's up and working, and whilst we have the limitations placed on us by things like the European Convention of Human Rights, it's going to be really, really difficult.
And presumably, Tom, miscreants like Abdulazidi would have been deported to Rwanda a long time ago if that scheme were in place.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is we appear to have a system at the moment where the interest of the British citizen is right at the bottom of the pile. when it comes to the list of priorities. At the top are individuals like him, and at the bottom is a British taxpayer. And I think that has got to change drastically, because I think the danger is people just get increasingly fed up. There's a deep unfairness to this, mounting anger, and I think it falls to us to take action on this, because we know if the Labour Party got in, all of this will get a lot worse, which is my fear.
What's your take on this kind of conversion therapy racket, is what some people are calling it? It seems to be going on within the churches. Magically, we're seeing queues and queues of asylum seekers seeing the light, becoming Christian.
This is ridiculous. I mean, it'd be one thing if somebody could clearly evidence that, if they'd been in Iran, and they could clearly evidence that they'd been a Christian for a long time in Iran and had been persecuted because of it, and they could evidence it. This isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about people who have come over here and then miraculously, once they're here, decided they're a Christian. And in the case of this disgusting individual who threw alkaline on the faces of a woman and children, his friends still say that he's a practising Muslim. But I've seen it. I've seen some examples of this locally. I remember going to a church and I was a bit sceptical. There's a group of people at the back who allegedly had just converted to Christianity, and I remember going up to him and probing him on it and saying, "Look, what was the key moment where you found the Lord? What was it?" And being met with basically blank looks and not a huge amount in terms of by way of a response.
There's no comprehension whatsoever.
The problem is the Archbishop of Canterbury is running the Church of England into the ground. Congregations are dwindling. And I think it's because he's taken his eye off his day job, which is to preach the gospel. Well,
he's turned into a newfound John the Baptist, so long as you're a certain demographic. I need to quickly ask you about a bit of a hoo-ha today at PMQs. Keir Starmer demanding Rishi Sunak apologises about a comment where Rishi claimed that a number of U-turns that Starmer had made, one of which was on trans issues, saying that 99% of women can't have a penis, which means 0.1% can. He then turned it to Brianna Jai's mother, who was in the gallery today, and said shame and demanded an apology. What's your take on this?
Well, I have to say, I mean, I've obviously got huge sympathy with the family member of the person who was killed. But I really don't think that tragic case is associated in any way with what the Prime Minister said today. The Prime Minister raised a legitimate point about Sir Keir Starmer's flexibility on the issue of what constitutes a woman. And I think it's legitimate for the Prime Minister to point that out. I don't even know whether the Prime Minister was aware who was in the gallery today. Probably not. He raised a question about which went to the core of Keir Starmer, the man, and the fluidity of all of his views, and I think he was entitled to do so. And is there now a case being made, would you say, that Starmer has thrown this grieving mother into the media spotlight? I mean, the press will be harassing her now for a statement. It seems very inappropriate, and if I was Sir Keir Starmer, it's certainly not something I would do. And conflating the two things, I think, is sort of highly inappropriate, and somehow insinuating the Prime Minister sort of deliberately did this to cause offence to somebody who was grieving. It's absurd. I think it's a wrong move by Keir Starmer. The Prime Minister was entitled to say what he said, and I'm pleased that he's not apologising for what he said. OK, Tom, and thank you very much. We're going to have Graham Stringer, Labour Party MP, on at 4 o'clock. We'll put that question to him and debate it throughout the show. Let me know what you think out there. Should Rishi Sunak, beg your pardon, apologise for this comment, or was it an innocent comment? He didn't know who was in the gallery, or should he apologise for the offence caused? Now, moving on, it's time for our brand new Great British Giveaway and your chance to win £18,000 in cold, hard cash. Here's all the details that you need to make that yours.
This is your chance to win £18,000 cash in our very latest Great British Giveaway. Cash to spend on anything you like. That's like having an extra £1,500 in your bank account each month for a whole year. What would you use that for? It could go towards your mortgage or rent, buy monthly treats, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. For your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Right, you're watching and listening to GB News. Coming up, disgraced paedophile pop star Gary Glitter has lost a parole board bid to be freed from jail, and we'll get to all the reaction to this in just a moment. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Now, next Monday, the Prime Minister will take part in a special People's Forum live on GB News in the northeast of England. Over the course of the hour, he'll take questions directly from you, the great British public, the only people who really matter. If you want to be there, head to gbnews.com/PM to register your interest today, or scan the QR code you can see on your screen right now. OK, it's 3:27. Moving on, disgraced singer Gary Glitter will not be set free after being refused parole today. The 79-year-old, whose real name is Paul Gadd, was jailed for 16 years in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls between 1975 and 1980. He had been automatically released last year, but was put back behind bars after breaching his licence conditions. Well, joining us now with the latest is Jeff Moody, who's at the prison where Glitter is being held. Jeff, welcome to the show. What's the latest on this case?
Well, yes, as you say, he was convicted and served half of that 16-year sentence, and then he was released last February, but within 6 weeks of being released, he was back behind bars, having not fulfilled the conditions of his licence. It's thought that he allegedly was found to be downloading indecent images of children. Well, the parole hearing was held in private over the last couple of weeks. Normally, these things very often you you can find out more information, but it was felt that it should be done in private in respect to his victims. The parole board was basically considering two issues. Firstly, whether there was any chance of him re-offending, and secondly, they were looking at his conduct in prison, whether he's shown any remorse, any contrition, and that again feeds into the idea of whether he would be safe to be let out. So on those two counts, today the parole board has said that it found on the evidence that at the time of the offending, the original offending, and also while he was out on licence last year, Mr. Gadd still had a sexual interest in underage girls. This is something that he personally has denied, though. They also looked at his behaviour, and they said that he's shown a lack of victim empathy. He's shown very little remorse. He has apologised in public, but it was felt by the victims and by various lawyers and various people that that apology didn't come across as particularly severe and was a long time ago. He's also said that he hasn't taken part in any of the rehabilitation programmes that have been offered to him in prison. Nothing has been done to address his offending, to look at the causes of those offending, and they said that he still continues to have an interest in young children. Well, the decision came after, and I quote here, after considering the circumstances of his offending, the lack of progress made while he's in custody and out on licence, and the other evidence presented at the hearing, the panel was not satisfied that release at this point would be safe for the protection of the public. Rather, the panel considered that Mr. Gadd was appropriately located in custody behind me here in Portland, where outstanding levels of risk could be addressed. Well, the 79-year-old may not necessarily spend the rest of his life behind bars. He will be up for parole again. We're not sure exactly when that will be, but there will come a time automatically when he'll be up for parole again. But certainly, for now, he's staying well and truly behind bars.
OK, thank you, Jeff Moody, for all the latest on the singer Gary Glitter, real name Paul Gadd, today denied parole. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including claims from MPs that Rishi Sunak's decision to scrap the Birmingham to Manchester leg of HS2 represents poor value for money. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Martin. It's 3:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. A simple choice needs to be made on the future of the NHS. That's according to Sir Keir Starmer as he faced the Prime Minister in the Commons today. It comes as the government announced a new plan to boost the number of dental appointments available across England. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader said 14 years of Conservative government had led the health service to fall into neglect. However, the Prime Minister says the best way to ensure the NHS has the funding it needs is not to make billions of unfunded spending commitments.
Record funding, record doctors and nurses, record number of appointments, higher cancer survival rates. But what's happening under Labour's watch in Wales, Mr. Speaker? Let's have a look. A fifth of people in Wales are currently on a waiting list. Waits of 18 months or more are 10 times higher than that in England, and people are waiting twice as long for an operation. Their failure has sent the Welsh NHS back to square one, and will never let them do that here.
Downing Street says Rishi Sunak will have his weekly audience with the King over the phone following His Majesty's cancer diagnosis. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales has made his first public appearance since a series of health blows to the royals. He carried out an investiture, a ceremony where he formally hands out state honours at Windsor Castle. Prince William is expected to take on further royal duties during his father's treatment, along with the Queen and Princess Anne. And house prices are continuing to rise across Britain for a fourth straight month. Halifax says the property market saw a 1.3% increase in January. Annual growth also hit a peak of 2.5%, the highest since January last year. Average prices now stand at just over £291,000. That's up by nearly £4,000 since December. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
for stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2622 and €1.1721. The price of gold is £1,616.26 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,639 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Sophia. Now you're watching and listening to GB News. Plenty more to bring you across the programme, including the latest on plans to boost dentistry across England and a review of earliest Prime Minister's Question Time when Rishi Sunak was forced into a moment where now Keir Starmer is demanding he makes an apology. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
So the highway code was amended recently. Passed me by, but anyway, a new poll suggests this has made no difference to the safety of road users, and I could believe that.
Yeah, there was an awful crash in London, wasn't there? A bus and a pedestrian yesterday.
Fatality.
So we're asking, is the highway code fit for purpose, or should we just scrap it altogether? That's our debate this morning, and we're joined by Danny Kelly. She argues highways are not fit for purpose, and cycling instructor Anna Hughes thinks they are. Good morning to you both.
You see, Anna, I think it's a good thing. I think the highway code is a good thing. I just don't think that any of us pay any attention to it, or we should all be tested on it quite regularly, I would have thought. We should have revision courses in it.
Yeah, I think you just summed it up, Eamon, by saying the changes passed you by. I actually asked a few of my fellow cyclists and pedestrians, what is classified as vulnerable road users, about this very thing. I said, has the new highway code made things safer for you? And most people said, not at all. Drivers don't know what it is. They don't know what the changes are. They probably don't know what the rules are to start with. And as you've just said, doing refreshers is a really good idea. It's a bit bizarre that we're given a license to operate this quite dangerous machinery, and then we're never tested again, and especially not on the highway code, which is, especially when it changes, why wouldn't we be retested on that or have to do refresher courses on it? You know, there are conflicts on the road, there are fatalities. It makes sense to be aware of what the highway code says, because it is there to keep us safe.
Yeah, and Danny Kelly, when I think back, I think it was 1999 I passed my driving test. Hardly any bikes on the road then, to be honest, probably virtually none.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's Questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:37. You're watching or listening to Martin Daubney on GB News. I'm with you until 6 o'clock, live from the heart of Westminster. Now, MPs are voicing their concerns as they worry that building HS2 between London and Birmingham will be poor value for money. HS2's executive chairman, Sir John Thompson, says this section alone will cost more than £66.5 billion, far exceeding the original budget of a mere £44.5 billion. Well, joining us now to discuss this in the studio is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, this is as old as the hills, this story now. It's £100 billion and counting. It's a white elephant, not a single passenger has moved. Will it ever start?
Well, it sounds, from what these MPs are saying, that we've ended up in the worst of all possible worlds. Because, of course, remember, this was a project conceived under Labour, championed by consecutive Conservative MPs, supposed to go in a Y shape, London, Euston to Birmingham, then in two Ys, one to Leeds, one to Manchester, connect our great northern cities, actually not to each other, but to London. The line to Leeds was cancelled a couple of years ago. Then Rishi Sunak went up to Manchester Conservative Party conference where he stood there and told that city it wasn't coming there. And now, the bit remaining, the rump, as the chair of the Public Accounts Committee says, from Birmingham to Old Oak Common, they'd like it to go through to Euston, but there is no guarantee of that either. It depends entirely if they can get enough private sector funding. So we end up with what should have been a Y, and we've got a little bit going from somewhere west of London to Birmingham. Doesn't solve the issues in the north at all, doesn't increase connectivity between our great northern cities, is dire, does nothing for that, costs an absolute bomb. And I think worth saying too, I mean, pictures of the tunnels up on screen, a lot of the reason, clearly bad management, but a lot of the reason why the cost is astronomical on that section is because the vast majority of that journey is now going to be either in underground tunnels or in deep, deep cuttings, because so many objections were raised by people living nearby. That has sent the cost through the roof, which has meant that the government has felt they can't afford to run it to Leeds and Manchester, and we're ending up with something they're saying is the exact words, will not be value for money as its total cost significantly outweighs its benefits. Now, they're saying if it had run as was originally planned to Manchester and Leeds, the cost-benefit analysis, they would have got more money back, more benefit per mile. But that has gone, huge amounts of money spent, but the government saying it's the right decision, saying they're doing it for the lowest reasonable cost, and they don't want to cancel it, I think, partly because they'd have thrown 11 billion down the drain. But also, I suspect, because how embarrassing to spend a decade and more talking about this and then scrap the whole thing. I think part of the Old Oak Common to Birmingham is a bit of face saving.
Well, there's lots of whys. You said whys. Why spend £100 billion and not get anything off the ground? Why go to Old Oak Common, which is like going to Stansted and calling it London? It means you've got to transfer onto the tube. Well, and that's going to eradicate any time saving. Why charge people so much for the privilege? But today, Andy Burnham and the Mayor of Birmingham, they're gathering, right, because they're still convinced they can breathe life into this.
Well, yes, because a lot of the ground properties have already been sold, land has already been bought. They're very keen to salvage something from this. And when this announcement was made back late last year, Andy Street, who West Midlands Mayor, bear in mind, a Conservative mayor, was deeply, deeply unhappy and on the verge of resigning, even though it goes to Birmingham. Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester, of course, completely livid, but they are trying to salvage something. So they're currently meeting. There's a press conference going on at the moment. They are talking to the private sector. The meeting today, they're reviewing the area. I'm just looking at this map here between sort of Stoke-on-Trent, Crewe, Stafford, but basically between Birmingham and Manchester, seeing how they can improve it, because they have a huge problem with capacity. Part of the reason for HS2 was speed, to get there quicker, but a lot of it was capacity. They simply don't have the capacity on those existing lines. But whether they will be able to drum enough private investment up to really make a significant difference is... well, we shall have to see.
Well, it'd be a miracle, I think, if they did. I campaigned twice in this area. I was an MEP for the West Midlands. I didn't meet a single person who wanted it. I just didn't meet a single voter who wanted it. I met many, many people who were dead against it because of the environmental damage it caused, a feeling that it was designed to get Londoners to and fro to Birmingham 10 minutes fast. Well, what about local transport services? They were promised in 2019 levelling up, treating the regions with parity. We haven't seen transport improve across the Midlands, across the Pennines, across east-west rather than north and south. It always seems to be a London-centric policy.
It does, indeed. And, I mean, you could get to Birmingham pretty quickly in the first place.
And Manchester already.
But, Manchester, Leeds, Hull, Liverpool, all those millions of people, 17 million people in the north of England, the connectivity is shocking. It takes about the same to get from Leeds to Manchester on the train now as it did about 50 years ago, which is really dreadful. So, yes, you can go back, the east-west, if you were to go back in time, and it shouldn't always be about getting to and from London. But as you say, I mean, look at London. We've got this brand fabulous new Elizabeth line, no expense spared. Yeah. People in the north of England will be looking and thinking, well, HS2, well, at least it was something, but they feel that their transport links have been totally neglected.
Yeah, I think I've got a great point there. Thank you, Catherine Forster. I mean, I got a train from Nottingham to Lincoln, and I'm not joking. I was looking out the window, a tractor overtook the train. That's where we're at. And these people are banging on about saving 10 minutes getting to London. I sometimes wonder if they live in the same world as us. Thank you, Catherine. Great stuff. Now you're watching and listening to GB News. Coming up, we'll be heading to Bristol after hundreds have queued in the past couple of days in the vain hope of NHS dental treatment. Is the NHS to blame or is it something else? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Ken, do you find the Union flag, the Union Jack, divisive?
In some situation, but as Simon quite clearly stated, and I agree with everything that he says in regards that there's situation when people use it for ulterior motive to cause fear, alarm and distress. We saw that with the far right when they came up to saying protecting the Churchill statues and things of that nature. But largely on the large whole, even I wave the St. George's flag on a sporting occasion. And I don't see anything wrong in raising the Union Jack or the St. George's flag, so long as the intention is correct. And as he says, Mr. Brockhurst, he served for the country and he should have every right to be proud of what he's done and the way that he wants to display it.
All right, Simon, what do you make of this kind of, I would argue it as like student social media-based politics, where you get these pillocks from the Green Party or whatever saying, oh, it's divisive and I can't believe it. It will be legal in this country to do... Do those people need to get out more? I was on the streets of Stratford earlier on, an incredibly diverse place, speaking to a massive range of people right across different age demographics. I couldn't find a single sausage who said to me that they thought that this guy from the Green Party was right.
He obviously has absolutely no attention from anybody, and this is his way of finding attention. Both Ken and myself, we both agree that nobody should use any symbol of national identity to offend others deliberately, because that's just inflaming a situation. There's so much sensitivity around so many things today, and people do get offended by so much so quickly without any rhyme or reason.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. It's 3:48. You're watching or listening to Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, dentists will be offered a golden hello payment of up to £20,000 to address the shortage of dental appointments in the UK. Rishi Sunak hopes it'll see more than 1 million extra people get their choppers checked and bring an end to scenes like this in Bristol, where hundreds of people have been queuing outside a new dental practice in the vain hope of getting registered these past 2 days. Well, let's cross now to Bristol and speak with GB News' national reporter Theo Chikomba, who's been outside that dentist. And Theo, extraordinary scenes that seem to represent not only broken Britain, but the absolute vanity, the forlorn hope of even dreaming of getting a dental space these days.
Yes, well, it's a desperate situation for people who live in this area. As you said, in the last 2 days, hundreds of people have been queuing outside this practice. So being inside the practice this afternoon and people just being turned away, they had to lock the doors. So they've got an issue where they've registered 1,500 people, but many more people who live in this area are still coming here to try and get that appointment. So it's a situation which is... Apologies for that. But we've got this situation where people are coming here desperately trying to get an appointment and they're being turned away. And it's a situation which is an example of what's happening around the country, where some practices have had to close and others are starting to reopen, and everyone flocks to them to try and get a place. Now, we heard from the operations manager, and this is what she told me earlier today.
It's been overwhelming in a way. We didn't expect that much crowd on the day one. We had to get the police involved because they were fighting, people were arguing and jumping the queue. And the second day we had to get the bouncers in on our personal expense because the police could not come in the next day. So the third day, today we decided we're not going to do any enrollment because we've already enrolled 1,500 people already. And we want to do it in a phased way. We want to actually see those 1,500 patients. It's no point enrolling and not seeing those patients. So we've started seeing patients today, and also trying to get people not to queue up and do it in a way that it's a phased way and people are not queuing up. And it's good for the staff as well that they can actually come to the premises without jumping from the queue. So, getting problems because they're not happy as well, and that's the reason. Yeah.
Now, of course, we've heard this £20,000 which is being offered to practices if they open a practice in an area which is currently underserved. The head dentist here tells me it's a drop in the ocean because we've seen similar ideas put forward by the government in years gone by. But of course, it's yet to be seen whether or not this will make a difference. But for now, though, there is still huge frustration in this area as people are expecting to come to this dentist. They've been waiting for many months since it closed last year. Now it's opened and they can't get a place.
Go, Theo Chikomba, thank you for that update live from Bristol. I want to talk about this story. This is something that I've been looking at since it started. There's an extraordinary picture, I don't know if we have it, taken, appears by a drone. You can see the overhead queue outside of this dentist in Bristol. It snakes around the block. The queue was so big that in the end, police were called because people were shoving to the front and it was just getting rather rowdy. And is this about the broken state of NHS dentistry? £200 million extra per year apparently is being called for to cope with the shortfall of appointments. We already spend £3 billion per year every year on NHS dentistry, and clearly the system is stretched to breaking point. It's over capacity. So many people so often at GB News write in and tell us getting a dental appointment, or for that matter, a GP appointment, has become the stuff for fantasy. This all started to go terribly wrong during lockdown. A lot of GPs stayed away. A huge backlog, one of the unforeseen circumstances, you could say, although a lot of us did see it coming, of people staying at home, unable to get to dentists, pulling their teeth out with pliers, sometimes DIY dentistry. and still going through this terrible conundrum when the dentist reopened of trying to get an appointment. But this particular dentist is very, very interesting. Look at the close-up pictures of the queue. Look at the area. Look at the area, the Ashley ward of Bristol. Look at the demographics. And we can see something which a lot of us have been talking about for a long time, and that is, if you have uncontrolled immigration into the country, particularly younger people, and they're having their children and they're dropping into an area and boosting the population, we've been saying for years that services will be stretched to the point of being non-existent. And so when a new dentist opens in an area like this, don't forget, people who've been living in this area for many, many years, they will already have a dentist. But those who haven't been living there quite so long, well, they've been unable to get a dentist to take them onto their books for years, because as we all know, in most towns around Britain, you'd be lucky to get a dental appointment if you tried. Certainly, to be able to register onto a new practice or an existing practice is becoming the stuff, as I said, of fantasy. And so we have this dental practice here in St Paul's in Bristol. When it opens, it's literally getting mobbed around the block, looking like some sort of food queue. Now, we said a long time ago this would be the inevitable consequence of opening our borders, and now we're seeing it. It has to be taken as a factor, particularly when you look at the demographics of this area. It's about 25% immigrant community. There's about 15,000 people born in that area versus about 5,000 people come from outside the area. And it just goes to show you that's where we're at. OK. Superb. So there's lots more to come in the next hour, plenty more, including we'll ask, is the Home Office in crisis? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Mild for the rest of today in the far south, with rain returning later on. Cold elsewhere across the UK, with further snow showers affecting the far north of Scotland overnight. Otherwise clear spells for Scotland, Northern Ireland and much of northern and central England, as well as North Wales. Temperatures falling away here overnight, but further south the cloud thickens. The wind picks up, outbreaks of rain return by dawn, heavy and persistent for some southern and southwestern parts of the UK. Rain warning force because could be some disruption early on. That rain is carried in by an Atlantic wind, and that's bringing much milder air into the south for Thursday. But as it bumps into the cold air and tracks north through the morning, mid-Wales, North Wales into the Midlands, as well as northern England, we're going to see increasingly spells of snow. Now, there'll be patchy accumulations at lower levels. Some places might not see much at all, but over hills, some significant snow, and certainly for higher parts of North Wales and northern England, the Peak District into the South Pennines, risk of significant disruption, 25 centimetres of snow above 200 or 300 metres, as well as the freezing rain risk. Now, the rain, sleet and snow pushes north through the rest of Thursday and into Friday across Northern Ireland, into northern England and southern Scotland. By this time, most of the snow will be over hills, staying dry in the far north as we end the week, but it stays cold here. Elsewhere, it's increasingly mild into the weekend, but with further rain and showers.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that, and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, it's been revealed that the King is to have weekly phone conversations with the Prime Minister. Buckingham Palace says it will be instead of their regular face-to-face meetings, but the King on the mend. The manhunt continues for chemical attacker Abdulazidi, with police saying they believe the suspect is now being helped by others. It's been over a week since the dreadful attack carried out on a woman and her 2 children. But the big question is, why on earth hasn't Britain's most wanted man been caught yet? And they queued for hours over 3 days just to get a simple dental appointment. But the practice in Bristol is now turning people away. The police were even called after the queue kicked off. Can the government's cash offer to dentists help to get more NHS patients treated, or is something else to blame? That's all coming up in your next hour. Okay, I want to hear from you in all the usual ways. Please email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. Got Chris Hope next to me in a minute. We're having a big debate. Should Rishi Sunak apologise? He made a rather clumsy comment at PMQs. And Brianna Jai, of course, the mother of the team, was there in the gallery today, and it's caused a huge issue. Keir Starmer demanding an apology. Is that the right thing to do, or is it a bit of a storm in a teacup? We'll have that debate next. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom is that Sir Keir Starmer has accused the Prime Minister of letting parts of the country go without basic dental care in the Commons today. It comes as the government announced a new plan to boost the number of dental appointments available across Britain. Well, speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader said 14 years of Conservative government had seen the NHS fall into neglect.
He should follow Labour, scrap the non-dom tax status, use the money to fund 2 million more hospital appointments every year. But, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister is oddly reluctant to follow us on this. What exactly is so special about this tax avoidance scheme that the Prime Minister prioritises it above the NHS?
Sir Keir Starmer, well, the Prime Minister responded, criticising Labour's plan for the NHS, saying it included billions of unfunded spending commitments.
Record funding, record doctors and nurses, record number of appointments, higher cancer survival rates. But what's happening under Labour's watch in Wales, Mr. Speaker? Let's have a look. A fifth of people in Wales are currently on a waiting list. Waits of 18 months or more are 10 times higher than that in England, and people are waiting twice as long for an operation. Their failure has sent the Welsh NHS back to square one, and will never let them do that here.
Rishi Sunak. Well, the government is offering dentists cash incentives to take on new patients in areas of dire need. The new scheme aims to make dental appointments available to around 1 million more people across England. Dentists will be offered payments of between £15 and £50 for each new patient. Meanwhile, you may have seen the pictures of hundreds of people queuing up outside a new NHS dental practice in Bristol earlier today and yesterday. Hundreds of people were seen snaking around the block after a clinic offered to enrol new NHS patients. Well, the clinic's manager, Shivani Bandari, said the number overwhelmed them completely.
Didn't expect that much crowd on the day one. We had to get the police involved because they were fighting, people were arguing and jumping the queue. And the second day we had to get the bouncers in on our personal expense because the police could not come in the next day. So the third day, today we decided we're not going to do any enrollment because we've already enrolled 1,500 people already. And we want to do it in a phased way. We want to actually see those 1,500 patients. It's no point enrolling and not seeing those patients.
Downing Street has confirmed Rishi Sunak will continue to have his weekly audience with the King, but it will be conducted by phone following His Majesty's cancer diagnosis. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales has made his first public appearance since his father's condition was made public. He led an investiture ceremony handing out state honours such as OBEs and MBEs at Windsor Castle today. Prince William's expected to carry out further royal duties in place of the King, along with the support of the Queen and Princess Anne. Now, as you've been hearing, the mother of a transgender teenager who was murdered last year is due to meet the Labour leader today. Esther Jai was watching in the Commons during this afternoon's Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak was criticised for making a joke about Sir Keir Starmer's position on gender issues. Number 10 has not apologised for the remark, insisting that it was a legitimate critique of the Labour leader's stance on the correct definition of a woman. Spanish farmers are blocking major roads with tractors and burning tyres today, protesting against European Union bureaucracy and competition. More than a dozen major roads were blocked across Spain this morning as convoys of tractors converged on Barcelona to confront their local authorities. It's the latest sign of growing anger across Europe after similar protests were in Germany, France and Belgium in recent weeks. The right-wing US media personality Tucker Carlson says he plans to record an interview with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. The former Fox News host announced the interview late yesterday in a short video posted to his website and on social media. He said he plans to expose what he calls lies told by other media outlets about Russia and claimed that other journalists hadn't bothered to try to interview Mr. Putin. Many journalists have taken to online platforms to dispute that claim as false. It would be the first time a media personality from the West has interviewed the Russian president since the invasion of Ukraine. For the latest stories, do sign up to the GB News alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now let's start with an update on the royals. Downing Street says that the King will hold weekly phone conversations with the Prime Minister. And this comes as the monarch has travelled back to the Sandringham estate to begin treatment. Number 10 and Buckingham Palace took the unusual step of confirming details about the weekly call in an attempt to show that the King was carrying on with his duties as normal. Today, Prince William returned to royal duty after his wife's abdominal operation by conducting an investiture at Windsor Castle. Meanwhile, Prince Harry is on his lonely way back to the US after his flying visit to the UK to see his father. Well, GB News presenter Pip Thompson is in Windsor with all the latest. Pip, what's the latest down on the ground? Lots and lots of well-wishers there to wish the King well.
Good afternoon to you, Martin. Well, the King is not here. He is some 3 hours away in Sandringham, but his son, Prince William, was very much here earlier today, back on royal duty for the first time in 3 weeks, and certainly for the first time since his father's cancer diagnosis that was revealed on Monday. Prince William was conducting an investiture ceremony here at Windsor Castle, handing out some 50 honours to people from all walks of life, and they included the former England striker Ellen White, who received an MBE, and other people who have done so much for charity. And of course they were very keen to speak to Prince William and also send their very best wishes to his father, King Charles. And we caught up with some people, including Ellen White, after the investiture.
Sent my best wishes to the King and obviously to Kate as well, to Princess of Wales. But yeah, no, he was lovely, and yeah, it was incredible to meet him again, and to obviously for him to give me the MBE. So yeah, it was a very special day.
To have the recognition for the work that Little Hearts Matter does, and amazing to think that people are interested in what the families go through. And we didn't know who we would have, and because everybody's not been around, I was thinking, oh, I wonder who we might get. And so I really hope that you know, King Charles is okay and that the treatment goes well, because I'm medical by background, so you know, it's a tough time for the family. So I hope that goes well, and that, you know, the Princess of Wales is getting better as well. It's terribly important.
So by all accounts, it does seem that Prince William very much welcomed and appreciated the good wishes that were sent to his father. And we should just say as well that Kensington Palace did tell me that Prince William was always due to host this investiture ceremony. It's not a case of him standing in for his father. Prince William does these ceremonies, as does Princess Anne. But there is nothing imminent in Prince William's diary now, apart from this gala dinner in central London this evening for London Air Ambulance charity. He is due to be making, we understand, a short speech, so will be interesting to hear and to see whether he does make reference to his father. But after that, well, half term is coming up, so he will be helping, I'm sure, look after his children here on the Windsor estate at Adelaide Cottage. And of course, his wife Catherine, the Princess of Wales, she is still recovering from that abdominal surgery. So Prince William's royal duty today, that's the first time he's been back to work, I think, since January the 11th. But of course, there's constant speculation that he's going to have to do more and more royal duties over the next few weeks and months, because his father is receiving treatment after that form of cancer diagnosis, and he is currently convalescing at Sandringham. Now, we also understand today that, as you mentioned, Martin, that weekly audience with Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, which normally takes place in person at Buckingham Palace every Wednesday, that today is being conducted over the phone. Now, whether that is indefinitely or whether that is just for today has yet to be clarified, but it certainly has taken place over the phone. Of course, we never know what they discuss. It is very much a private conversation. And this afternoon, the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, he has been spotted at Heathrow Airport, believed to be on his way back to California. He flew in from there only yesterday, so he's been in the UK for 24 hours. He spent 45 minutes with his father, King Charles, yesterday before King Charles went to Sandringham, and it does not appear that he has had any contact with his son, Prince William. But certainly some sort of relationship, we can gather, is continuing, because he did spend a little bit of time with King Charles. But of course, he's not been back in the country. I mean, it's a long trip, isn't it, Martin? 10 or so hours on a flight, 30-odd minutes with his father, and now he's heading back to America.
Yeah, Pip Thompson, lots of questions to be asked. Thank you for that report live from Windsor. The King back to his duties. That's fantastic news. Lots and lots of fantastic messages coming in. And does it underline the pointlessness, the superfluous nature now of Harry. William doesn't even want to talk to him. He'll be getting back to duties. Harry shuffling back to California, and maybe this is the moment where the public has finally just fallen out of love with Harry. Now, moving on, there's been some heated exchanges in the Commons today during Prime Minister's question time. Rishi Sunak was accused of making an offensive transgender joke by Sir Keir Starmer. The Labour leader said it was shameful, as the mother of murdered transgender teenager Brianna Jai was in the Commons gallery. And let's hear what was said.
Defining a woman. Although in fairness, that was only 99% of a U-turn. The list goes on, but the theme is the same, Mr. Speaker. It's empty words, broken promises, and absolutely no plan.
Of all the weeks to say that, when Brianna's mother is in this chamber, shame. Parading as a man of integrity when he's got absolutely no responsibility. Absolute.
OK, well, that's caused a huge furore. And joining me now to discuss this in our studio is our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. What do you think is happening? Can we start with the basics? So at Prime Minister's question time, for viewers who may not understand, do Prime Ministers know what the questions are? Do they have pre-prepared answers? And would they know who's even in the gallery?
The PM won't know what the other side are going to ask. They can have an idea on what Tory MPs will ask about, because often Tory MPs raising issues about their constituency or a policy issue want to get a good answer from their leader, so they tip them off to get a good answer. A meeting, maybe a Home Office investigation, as we heard from Tim Lawton, raising the issues of migrants converting to Christianity to maybe to avoid being taken out of this country. So that was one example. In this situation, no. The two leaders there were reading out scripts ahead of what is a double by-election day next Thursday. It's the last PMQs before the half-term break. They both wanted to have a good kick at the other side and send them off back with a spring in their step. The PM, Rishi Sunak, was reading out a list of what he said were 30 U-turns by the government, by Labour, forgive me. One of them was defining a woman, although in fairness that was only 99% of a U-turn. That's because some Labour politicians don't want to say what a woman is because of the issue in the trans debate. Keir Starmer then hit back because he knew that Esther Jai, the mother of murdered Brianna Jai, was about to be in the gallery. Now, I understand that she wasn't actually in the gallery. She appeared a bit later after the exchange.
And that begs the question, is this just cheap politics from Starmer?
I don't think it is.
Because it's a valid criticism to say you don't know what a woman is, and he's hitting back at that. But then Starmer pivots to make it about a grieving mother whose child has been murdered.
Yeah, let's set aside whether she was or wasn't in the gallery, because you can watch it on TV at home and be offended. Let's park that to one side. Now, the left are saying this is the culture wars clashing with real life, with real grief. And this afternoon we've seen Keir Starmer meet with Esther Jai. Towards the end of the PMQs, we haven't shown it yet on air, Rishi Sunak made clear and gave a statement to clarify his position on the murder, saying that she demonstrates a compassion and empathy that she did is amazing, the very best of humanity.
Yeah, I heard that,
and that was him trying to say, I'm separating out the two things. We also had Esther McVey, the Cabinet Office Minister, on our show, PMQs Live, and she had this to say.
PM said something which was correct. Let's move the two issues, separate the two issues. And one of them is about biological sex. What is a woman? And I'm afraid Sir Keir Starmer can't say what a woman is. And that was the issue. So that's one issue. So Rishi was right to say that, to point out the fact that Labour can't say what a woman is. And considering there's a lot of legislation on what a woman is, that's important. Totally separate was the most horrific attack and murder of Brianna. That was absolutely awful. And you should not be conflating
So when he's saying what is a woman, he's not going to go at the trans community?
Absolutely not. And in fact, I thought it was hugely crass that Sir Keir Starmer should even have tried to conflate the two.
So here, grieving mother's, you know, amazing way she's carried herself is now part of the political debate, which isn't frankly great. I think it was clumsy. I think that he had a list of they were trying to go after, you know, Sir Flip-Flop, as they call him on the Tory side, and having a go at Starmer. They had a list of things he's reversed his positions on. They shouldn't have said that in the chamber.
But now, I mean, I covered the Brianna Jai story since the beginning. Often, a couple of times, I had to cut to a break. I was crying. It was so moving. The victim impact statements, the mother and the father read out. The Crown Prosecution Service statements, the detail from that case, incredibly moving. I just don't believe that Rishi Sunak would willingly throw this in there as a point. It seems clumsy, but my question to you is this. Has Keir Starmer now put a grieving mother, Esther Jai, in the media spotlight? Presumably the media will be trying to get a statement from her on this. Well, is that fair?
It makes it political. Angela Rayner, the deputy leader, arranged for the meeting with Esther Jai. It's difficult. I think that it was just inappropriate to make that remark when someone was in the room who deserves maximum respect at the moment, and it was a mistake. I mean, of course, everyone who's got a view on Rishi Sunak is piling in, saying this is. I mean, Stephen Flynn, the SNP Westminster leader, saying he's degraded his office, etc. It was definitely the wrong thing to say. But I think the whole idea of what is a woman, that culture wars space, Number 10 are clear to me this afternoon. They're going to keep saying this kind of thing, but they can separate, as you heard from Esther McVeigh, you separate out those cases from being critical of the position of the Labour Party.
OK, Chris Hope, thank you very much for that. Let me know what you think. Should Rishi apologise or not? But for that, you're watching or listening to GB News. So Keir Starmer says the Prime Minister has let parts of the country go without basic dental care. Is he right? I'll be joined by the Shadow Health Secretary shortly. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The EU rules are trying to choke even that. And I just think, you know, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you are right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods
and
are
remember,
being
a lot of people who work in the farm industry, Malone, get paid very little money.
They get paid.
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Pierce. And, you know, the profits... I think on Clark's Farm, I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or something. Right. And you say, what?
Yeah.
And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year working.
But Cara makes a really good point, though, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that have been passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. You know, I'm all for green protests, you know, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually... the only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You know, you can't just go in and say, you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way instead. The Tata Steel thing. Yes, exactly. You've got to do it this way instead. You know, lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time. So they're protesting, you know, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When
well,
you say
can't
you
get any more
support some of
obvious.
these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not a closet supporter. I think I've been quite open about Just Stop Oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the message. But I do appreciate the message. Yeah, but sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:23 now. The Metropolitan Police have given an update on the manhunt for Abdul Azidi, and GB News reporter Ray Addison joins us live now to give us that update. Ray, what's the latest?
Yeah, good evening, Martin. Well, Met Police telling us in that latest briefing that this is now being treated as an attempted murder investigation. 1 week on from that horrific assault last Wednesday, the 31-year-old victim remains sedated, and police have been unable to get any information from her. However, they do say now that they've found very strong indications that they were in a relationship, and the motive could have been that the relationship had broken down. They've had well over 500 calls across 999 and the dedicated 24-hour hotline, and they can reveal now that they've now tracked Azadi. The last known sighting on CCTV was at 11 p.m. now, crossing Vauxhall Bridge in London and then onto Vauxhall Bridge Road in the direction of Grosvenor Road. Now, the focus now for the Met will be where did he go from that point onwards. They do state that they believe that the direct target of the attack was the 31-year-old woman, and the children were injured indirectly as a result of the attack. Now, they say that tonight at 7:25 they're going to be issuing what they're calling an anniversary appeal to members of the public to come forward if they know something. They're also stressing that the National Crime Agency and hospitals which have been treating the 31-year-old female victim are saying that Azadi's injuries, analysis of those injuries look significant, and they believe that he could develop sepsis, and if he does develop sepsis, this could prove fatal. So they're saying, for your own good, walk into the nearest police station and just give yourself up.
Ray Addison for that update on the Abdul Azidi case. We'll have much more on that throughout the show. But first, let's turn to that political row over the NHS, which took place in the Commons today. Sir Keir Starmer accused the Prime Minister of letting parts of the country go without basic dental care. It comes as the government announced a new plan to boost the number of dental appointments across England. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader said 14 years of Conservative government has seen the NHS fall into neglect. However, the Prime Minister criticised Labour's plan for the NHS, saying it includes billions of unfunded spending commitments. Well, we're joined on the show now by Labour's Wes Streeting. Of course, he is the Shadow Health Secretary who joins me live from Westminster. Wes, welcome to the show. Fantastic to have you on. So, the government today is throwing a lot of extra money at dentistry, an extra 200 million pledge, including 20 grand sweeteners, signing on fees for dentists who take on new patients. Is this enough?
Well, a lot of what the government put forward today in terms of extra appointments and that targeted recruitment to get dentists into areas that are the most poorly served are proposals Labour's put forward previously, so I'm not going to knock that. What I do dispute is the Prime Minister's argument that this is a recovery plan. When we put forward those measures, we were clear about the fact that those were emergency measures to deal with the immediate crisis, but we won't rebuild NHS dentistry without reform of the NHS dentistry contract. Because what's happened is that the income for dentists, the difference between what they get for their private practice and what they get for their NHS practice has widened to the extent that the dentists are now handing back the dentistry contracts. NHS dentistry has become virtually non-existent in significant parts of the country. And we've got now in dentistry a situation where those who can afford it, or in some cases people who can't afford it but are borrowing to pay for it, are going private. And those who can't afford it or can't borrow are being left behind, and it's the worst of all worlds, terrible for patients, and we've heard some horrific examples of DIY dentistry, but also bad for taxpayers, because if you don't get there early with dental problems and regularly maintaining your teeth and looking after them, you end up with conditions that take you to A&E, which costs an arm and a leg for the NHS to deal with in hospital. So it's bad for patients and bad for the taxpayer, and frankly, after 14 years of Conservative government promising to reform the NHS dentistry contract back in 2010, what we got today was too little too late. And what I couldn't believe it when the Health Secretary said, oh, we're going to do contract reform in 2025. That's after the general election. Who's she trying to kid? They broke the promise in 2010 and in 2015 and in 2017 and in 2019. What's going to make 2024 any different? And I hope people bear that in mind when they go to the ballot box later this year.
OK, Mr Streeting, let me put it to you. We have pictures on the screen now, appalling scenes in Bristol. You've no doubt seen them, hundreds and hundreds of patients queuing around the block. You were there. Situation so bad, the police were called to dissipate the crowd. What would Labour do about fixing this? And actually, is this a symptom of just the fact we've been saying for years? Dentists, GPs, schools, everything is stretched to breaking point because of increased population boom and immigration.
Well, I'll say a couple of things in response to that. I mean, I was at that practice in Bristol. At 7 o'clock this morning, there was already a queue outside, and I asked people why they were there, and I've got some absolute horror stories. I mean, one woman has taken a couple of days now off work because she's desperate to get her 14-year-old son signed up to that NHS dentist. Another woman had already paid hundreds of pounds, for a temporary filling. But to get the fix that she needs, the permanent fix, will cost her well over £1,000, and she just doesn't have it. So that's the scale of the crisis we see after 14 years. What Labour would do is fundamental reform of the NHS dentistry contract. As I've argued on GB News plenty of times before, not all of the problems in the NHS come down to money, but I do accept that in dentistry, money is part of the answer. And what people will be shocked to hear is that last year there was a £400 million underspend in the NHS dentistry budget. And that reflects the staggering incompetence of the government, because if that 400 million quid went into contract reform, there'd be more dentists on a permanent basis. And what the dentists have said today is that the government haven't put forward a serious long-term plan that would help us to not just recruit more dentists, but retain the dentists we already have and the ones that we'll recruit into the future. More broadly, on population and population management, we know that is a challenge. We know that net migration are at record highs. And actually, one of the things I've been saying as the Shadow Health Secretary is that while I'm proud of the fact that lots of people have come from around the world to work in our National Health Service, that's been true for 75 years now, what we've seen is an over-reliance on recruitment of workers from overseas, often from countries that have got desperate shortages of their own, countries like Nepal, for example, where they desperately need their own healthcare workers, at the same time as we've been turning away British students with straight A grades from studying medicine and other related courses at our universities. In fact, some British universities, I'm not exaggerating this, were only taking international students because they were receiving letters from the government banning them from recruiting homegrown students. I don't think that's fair, but it's also incredibly short-sighted.
Mr Streeting, I totally agree with that. My question was rather the number of patients that need to be treated, because we've seen effectively a net immigration this year of almost 800,000. Goes without saying that we're going to run out of dentists, we're going to run out of GPs, we're going to run out of schools if we're not careful. How would that be tackled? Is the answer simply to throw endless money at this issue? £3 billion per year goes into dentistry already. The answer isn't money. Surely the answer is border control.
Well, I do think on immigration, of course, border control is part of the answer. That's not just true in terms of illegal migration, where I think the government's gone for gimmicks rather than serious solutions, but also in terms of managed migration. You know, if we're serious about reducing our country's reliance on overseas workers, You know, you need a serious plan for skills, which is what Labour's put forward, with more technical education to give young people right across the country the chance to train up in those industries where we do have serious skill shortages. Because look, I recognise the fact that in the immigration debate, a lot of the anxieties that I hear when I talk to people, not just in my own constituency, where people are proud of their roots from around the world, but in other constituencies too, is that worry about the housing infrastructure, public services infrastructure, and those are legitimate concerns, and why we need to manage our migration system more effectively. And again, it comes back to what I was saying about dentistry. This lot have had 14 years now. I hope people bear that in mind and give change a chance at the next general election.
OK, Wes Streeting, Shadow Health Secretary, thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Thank you very much. Now, we'll have lots more on that story between now and 5 o'clock, because we're crossing over live to Bristol, where hundreds of people, as we just said, have been queuing with a vain attempt of trying to register with an NHS dentist. And does Britain actually have a dental crisis? We're joined by a campaign group which certainly thinks so. But first, it's your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The top stories this hour. The Met Police, searching for the suspected chemical attacker, says Abdul Azizi's injuries could be fatal if he isn't treated, as he remains at large a week on. The Met Police have also revealed they've received hundreds of calls from the public in the search for the suspected Alkali attacker. They also say new pictures will be released shortly of where he has been. Police say there is a very strong indication that the attacker and victim were in a relationship, and the motive was that the relationship had broken down. The Metropolitan Police is offering £20,000 in a reward for any information leading to his arrest. The last known sighting of him was at 11 p.m. on Wednesday night. In other news today, Sir Keir Starmer has accused the Prime Minister of letting parts of the country go without basic dental care. In the Commons today, it comes as the government announced a plan to boost the number of dental appointments available across England. The Labour leader said 14 years of Conservative government had seen the NHS fall into neglect, but the Prime Minister criticised Labour's plan for the NHS, saying it included billions of unfunded spending commitments.
Record funding, record doctors and nurses, record number of appointments, higher cancer survival rates. But what's happening under Labour's watch in Wales, Mr. Speaker? Let's have a look. A fifth of people in Wales are currently on a waiting list. Waits of 18 months or more are 10 times higher than that in England, and people are waiting twice as long for an operation. Their failure has sent the Welsh NHS back to square one, and will never let them do that here.
And Downing Street has confirmed Rishi Sunak will continue to have his weekly audience with the King, but it will be conducted by phone following His Majesty's cancer diagnosis. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales has made his first public appearance since his father's condition was made public. He led an investiture ceremony, handing out state honours like OBEs and MBEs today at Windsor Castle. Prince William's expected to carry out further royal duties in place of the King, along with support from the Queen and Princess Anne. For the very latest news stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your phone, on the screen that is, or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
We had Grant Shapps on last week. He was talking about how defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, and we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous,
well,
at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:39. You're watching or listening to Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, furious residents in Northamptonshire are blasting their local council after a 60-foot-high monster warehouse was built right behind their homes. Homeowners on the Hook Close in Corby claim a metal frame appeared overnight, and they say they weren't even consulted. Well, joining us now from the shadow of that warehouse is our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis. Will, welcome to the show. It's an utter monstrosity. The locals weren't even told. What's the latest?
Yes, well, it's 60 foot high. When it's finished, there'll be space for around 100 cars and 25 HGVs. But not a single person on this road, Hook Close, were informed that it was going to be coming here. That's because Northamptonshire Council, which represents Corby as well as Kettering and Wellingborough here in Northamptonshire, they sent the consultation papers for the planning to the wrong area. They sent it to Hubble Road instead, which is about half a mile away. So some local people knew that there was going to be a new warehouse here, but not the people that will soon be living in the shadow of it. Right now, it is just a shell. It's just a metal frame, but these things go up incredibly quickly, covered in panels. And there was originally a Weetabix factory here, but residents told me that that was much smaller and much lower to the ground. So I've been speaking to some of the people that live on this street, starting out with Georgie, who told me how this has sort of affected her for the last few months and what it might mean for her future living on this street.
It's just been living hell. It feels like it's gone up overnight. But as a resident of Hook Close, this has sort of impacted, my well-being. It's in my garden sort of thing. I'm not gonna be able to sell. I mean, I will be able to sell, but I'm the devalue on my property because of this. Right now, I'm restless, like we all are. I think the whole street, we're all stressing. You work Monday to Friday. You want to enjoy your weekends, and then. I mean, if we get summer, I can't enjoy myself in the summer because I'm overlooked by this monstrosity.
Yes, well, her next-door neighbour as well, Josie, who's lived in his home for 12 years, he's also shocked and surprised to see the scale of the building that's going up just behind his garden.
I never heard nothing about this. I don't know what the noise is going to be. I don't know who came here. I don't know the traffic going to be. Nobody know nothing. I know this is very high. And after this is all covered, I'm going to live in darkness, I think.
Yes, well, the developers of the warehouse, Block Industrial, they say that groundworks are already complete and it's already actually advertising the distribution warehouse on Rightmove. Now, the local council, Northamptonshire Council, Conservative leader Jason Smithers said that this is, rightly, an error, but he did insist that the development is lawful and ensures that this mistake will never happen again. Of course, for local people, it's not an apology ultimately that they want. They want to see this reversed and they want to see the warehouse to begin taking down. This is one of those cases, isn't it, Martin, where councils get things incredibly wrong, impacting the people that really should be relying on them.
Yeah, Will Hollis, you know, the thing about this that gets people sticks in their craws, it has one rule for the council and one rule for everybody else. They should take that down and go and build it at the end of a councillor's garden. See how he likes it. Because you know damn sure as mustard, right? If you built an extension or put a conservatory up in this area without planning permission, you'd have to pull it down because of the council for getting your plans wrong. And yet they can simply say, oh, we made a mistake. Sorry, lads. Sorry, ladies. And there it is. Stalag Luft at the end of your garden. They should take it down and rebuild it outside the council houses. See how they like it up them. That's just my thoughts. Thank you, Will Hollis, there from that monstrous warehouse site. Moving on, plenty more to come in just a moment. We'll be crossing over live to Bristol, where hundreds and hundreds of people have been queuing to register with an NHS dentist. So bad the police were called to dissipate the crowds. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Chris, what is the preferred way in which the police go about their business at the moment? There's these two strands of thinking: evidence-based policing versus bobbies on the beat.
It's very, very difficult. The problem that police have got, basically, is that they're too thinly spread, and it's too much is expected of them. There's a long list, isn't it? Every month we hear police need to do more about this, police need to do more about that, and police do their best. They're overwhelmed with bureaucracy. I mean, when I was a young PC, if I took a shoplifter in, then I'd be in and out within an hour. You take a shoplifter in now, and you're doomed for the rest of your shift for 6 or 7 hours dealing with the bureaucracy. Police want to get back in those communities because community policing is really the core of policing. But such are the demands on their time at the moment, and the bureaucracy, and the fact that they are struggling now to retain experienced officers. People are hemorrhaging out of the police, and new recruits coming in haven't got that experience, and there's a good chance they may not stay anyway. So there's all sorts of problems. And for the Home Secretary to glibly say he wants more done, frankly, clearly shows he's got no understanding of the pressure police are under, and of course the constant criticism that they face across the board. Very rarely do you actually hear of police officers getting praised for acts of bravery or acts of compassion. So there's a problem with morale in the police force, and clearly a problem with the Home Secretary, who needs to get out there and talk to officers on the front line who frankly are struggling. And last night, of course, was a graphic example.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Next Monday, the Prime Minister will take part in a special People's Forum live on GB News in the northeast of England. Over the course of the hour, the Prime Minister will take questions directly from you, the great British public, the only people, after all, who really matter. And if you want to be there, head to gbnews.com/PM to register your interest today, or scan that QR code you can see on your screen right now. So it's 4:47 and dentists will be offered a golden hello payment of up to £20,000 to address the chronic shortage of dentist appointments in the UK. Rishi Sunak hopes it'll see more than 1 million extra people get their teeth checked and bring an end to scenes like this in Bristol, where hundreds and hundreds of people queued around the block outside a new dental practice in the forlorn hope of getting registered. Well, let's cross live now to Bristol and speak with GB News' national reporter Theo Chikomba, who's outside that dental practice now. Theo, what's the latest?
Yes, well, as you rightly mentioned, in the last couple of days there have been queues, hundreds of people waiting to register at this newly opened practice in the St Paul's area here in Bristol. And I'm kindly joined by Adamski, I should say, who's been waiting for the last couple of days with his family as well. Just tell me about your experience in the last couple of days.
Well, on the first day, literally 2,000 people came. And I was way at the back of the queue. I came yesterday and there was an incident where the security man said to me, you know, because I'm local, I just live on the street, come back later on when there's people who was trying to push in have been seen or what have you. I came back later on and they cut off early because they've had the full amount of people. I still not got to register. I've been waiting literally 2 years to see a dentist. And the last one I seen was a mobile dentist down by Brunswick Square that travels around city to city, sorting people out who's homeless, etc. I'm not homeless, but I'm saying now they're telling me to come back in 8 weeks. It's been a mission.
And just finally, very quickly, you've got your family here as well. How desperate are you for an appointment?
Very, very desperate. I've been to Bedminster, I've been to all the surrounding areas. They tell me to come back in 6 months, and when I've come back in the New Year's, they're telling me to come back in 9, 10 weeks. It's impossible. As I said, the last time I got seen was by a mobile dentist that travels from town to town to town, and they stopped outside BDP, which is Bristol Drug Project, and they was serving people who were homeless and people like myself who's been trying to get help from dentistry in my own area and can't get it.
Thank you so much, Adamski. Well, he's just one of many people who've been here over the last couple of days, desperately trying to get registered and get an appointment. They've already registered 1,500 people. Some of those people have been making their way here today, but they've had to lock the doors today because they simply don't have the capacity to have any more people. And this is one example that we've seen of people attempting to get appointments within the UK.
Thank you, Theo Chikomba. Horrendous situation. Poor old Adamski Watson there. 2 years without a dental appointment, has to go to a travelling van serving homeless people to get his teeth looked at. That's the state of modern Britain. And joining us now to discuss this is the founder of Toothless in England, Mark Jones. Mark, I don't know if you could hear that previous interview there with a patient outside that practice in St Paul's in Bristol. How commonplace is this kind of affair in your experience?
It's an everyday story, Martin. Thanks for having us back on. Great to speak with you again. Yeah, this is 2024, Martin, not 1824. You know, we're the sixth biggest economy in the world, and we got the people of one of the biggest cities in Britain, Bristol, queuing up on the pavement, picking up scraps of appointments that are thrown out of a very well-meaning, well-intentioned dental practice, hoping to serve the community with NHS dentistry. And Adamski's plight there is echoed up and down the country, and it's a terrible, terrible situation.
And Mark, is the answer more and more money? The NHS seems to be something of a leaky bucket. We chuck more money in and it continually seems to leak out. £3 billion per year every year already goes on dentistry. They're calling today for an extra 200 million quid. And meanwhile, the elephant in the room is net immigration of around about 800,000 per year. We have a situation here that's a recipe for disaster.
Well, I think there's several aspects to that, Martin. One being that there was a £400 million underspend last year. That 200 million announced today by the government. You don't have to be a mathematician to work out that they're in clover to the tune of 200 million. Money, of course, works, and this is no laughing matter. What, as I've said on your show before and others on your station, the contract needs radical reform. As for the immigration you mentioned, we're not here to advocate for anything other than an NHS dentist for everyone. That's our key demand. But amongst any of that number that you mentioned with immigrants, we know that there are thousands of overseas dentists in this country that want to work helping patients and people like Adamski and his family, but they cannot get through the regulators, get the tick in the box that they need from the regulator because the regulator's working too slow. That's a Dickensian organisation which requires radical reform. So, I hear what you're saying, but there are many things that are a little bit closer to home as far as what Westminster needs to do and what the NHS commissioners need to do. So they've got to really wake up and listen, open their ears to patients like Adamski, listen to patient groups like Toothless in England and to the dental profession. Everybody's saying the contract needs reform. Everybody's saying it needs a little bit more money to make it accessible for everyone.
OK, super stuff. We have to leave it there. Mark Jones, the founder of Toothless in England, thank you once again for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure. And that's all for this hour. But please stay with me, as in the next hour, I'll be joined by a former Met police officer, and I'll be asking him about Nottingham triple killer Valdo Colocani's benefits entitlement. And if you're not aware of this story, it emerged yesterday that the triple killer, because he was sent to a psychiatric hospital, can get £360 in universal credit per month, despite the fact he's a killer. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Mild for the rest of today in the far south, with rain returning later on. Cold elsewhere across the UK, with further snow showers affecting the far north of Scotland overnight. Otherwise clear spells for Scotland, Northern Ireland and much of northern and central England, as well as North Wales. Temperatures falling away here overnight, but further south the cloud thickens. The wind picks up, outbreaks of rain return by dawn, heavy and persistent for some southern and southwestern parts of the UK. Rain warning force because could be some disruption early on. That rain is carried in by an Atlantic wind, and that's bringing much milder air into the south for Thursday. But as it bumps into the cold air and tracks north through the morning, mid-Wales, North Wales into the Midlands, as well as northern England, we're going to see increasingly spells of snow. Now, there'll be patchy accumulations at lower levels. Some places might not see much at all, but over hills, some significant snow, and certainly for higher parts of North Wales and northern England, the Peak District into the South Pennines, risk of significant disruption, 25 centimetres of snow above 200 or 300 metres, as well as the freezing rain risk. Now, the rains lead sleet and snow pushes north through the rest of Thursday and into Friday across Northern Ireland, into Northern England and southern Scotland. By this time, most of the snow will be over hills, staying dry in the far north as we end the week, but it stays cold here. Elsewhere, it's increasingly mild into the weekend, but with further rain and showers.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Marnie says being sexy in business is entirely possible and maybe even better.
Well, Marnie, this is something I say is true. I've had to live with this for quite a long time. And I think you can do both. Now, tell me, it's lovely to see you, first of all.
Thank you for having me.
In all your gorgeousness. And you're telling me that often is regarded as something derogatory or something to hold you back. Is that right?
It's just this really unfair thing, this really unfair narrative that women can't do both. Even men can do it, as you know, Eamon. You can do it. You can do it all. And I just think, you know, women are so multifaceted. They can be mothers, they can be sexy, they can be businesswomen, they can be silly, they can be all these different dimensions. And this press push that we have to limit ourselves to one category is just unfair.
But do you think that is where some people may be wrong-footed or go wrong to underestimate you?
Exactly. There is that saying, disarm with charm. So, you know, that there is that idea that people do look at someone who cares about how they look, who's perhaps a bit feminine, and underestimate them. But hopefully I've proved that wasn't the case in the boardroom. And thank goodness for Karen Brady. She's definitely upped the glam stakes on the show. And if anybody can prove that you can be sexy and successful in business, I suppose it's her, really. But where do you think most of the criticism comes from? Because I have to say, hard to believe, but when I was younger, I certainly got a bit of this at my old employer, being told that I had to dress a certain way, not to be too sexy, which I found hugely
you were told this by women.
I was told this by a female boss who didn't like me wearing zips on the back of my dress. Not just me, but some of the other presenters there. And I took such offence. I felt like she thought that I was some sort of, I don't know what. Do you take offence when people are criticising you that, you know, in some way they think you're, I don't know? There's just no right answer. And as you said, I think Karen Brady is doing an excellent job at leading the charge that you can be glamorous and get the job done.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's exactly 5 o'clock. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. Today, it's been revealed that the King is to have weekly phone conversations with the Prime Minister. Buckingham Palace says it will be instead of the regular face-to-face meetings. And the manhunt continues for chemical attack suspect Abdul Azidi. And in the past hour, the Metropolitan Police have revealed that there is a very strong indication that Azidi and the woman he's accused of attacking were in a broken down relationship. We've got lots more extra information to share with you as well on that story. And triple killer Valdo Calacani is eligible to thousands of pounds in benefits while imprisoned at a secure hospital. The families of his victims have spoken out in anger, and I'm asking, should murderers ever be entitled to state benefits while inside? And Gary Lineker reveals that he helped to write the BBC's social media guidelines that have given him much more freedom. The Match of the Day presenter calls past arguments with his employer over impartiality a lover's tiff. But really, does Lineker deserve special treatment? He's marking his own homework here, surely. And I've been joined in the studio by James Daly, the newly promoted Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. He was laughing his head off at that Lineker stuff. We'll have much more on that and, of course, all the political stories after this. Get in touch all the usual ways. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you. The main news this hour. Sir Keir Starmer has accused the Prime Minister of letting parts of the country go without basic dental care in the Commons today. It comes as the government announced a new plan to boost the number of dental appointments available across England. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader said 14 years of Conservative government had seen the NHS fall into neglect.
He should follow Labour, scrap the non-dom tax status, use the money to fund 2 million more hospital appointments every year. But, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister is oddly reluctant to follow us on this. What exactly is so special about this tax avoidance scheme that the Prime Minister prioritises it above the NHS?
However, the Prime Minister criticised Labour's plan for the NHS, saying it included billions of unfunded spending commitments.
Record funding, record doctors and nurses, record number of appointments, higher cancer survival rates. But what's happening under Labour's watch in Wales, Mr Speaker? Let's have a look. A fifth of people in Wales are currently on a waiting list. Waits of 18 months or more are 10 times higher than that in England, and people are waiting twice as long for an operation. Their failure has sent the Welsh NHS back to square one, and will never let them do that here.
Meanwhile, police searching for the suspected chemical attacker Abdul Azidi say his injuries could be fatal if they aren't treated, as he remains on the run for a 7th day. The Metropolitan Police have also revealed they've received hundreds of calls from the public trying to help them locate the suspected Al-Khalai attacker. They also say new pictures will be released shortly, and there's a strong indication the attacker and the victim were in a relationship, and the motive for his attack may have been that that relationship had broken down. The Metropolitan Police is offering a £20,000 reward for any information leading to his arrest. Azidi has a history of sexual assault convictions which have prompted questions about his asylum status and his conversion to Christianity. He was last seen last Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Rishi Sunak has refused to apologise for making a reference to Sir Keir Starmer's stance on transgender people in the Commons. Esther Jai, the mother of Brianna Jai, wasn't in the Commons at the time during this afternoon's Prime Minister's questions, but was in the chamber later on. Rishi Sunak had been criticised for making a joke about Sir Keir Starmer's position on gender issues. Number 10 has not apologised for the remark, insisting it was a legitimate critique of the Labour leader's stance on the correct definition of a woman. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, told GB News the Prime Minister was highlighting Keir Starmer's indecisiveness.
The Prime Minister was saying today, apart from showing enormous respect for Brianna Gray's mother and the incredible dignity that she has shown in the face of unspeakable tragedy, was that Labour cannot make its mind up about really important issues.
Dentists are being offered cash incentives by the government to take on new patients in areas of dire need. The new scheme aims to make dental appointments available to around 1 million more people across England. Dentists are to be offered payments of between £15 and £50 for each new patient they take on. Well, hundreds of people were queuing up outside a new NHS dental practice in Bristol earlier on today and yesterday after a clinic offered to enrol new NHS patients. The Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says the government should have acted more quickly.
It's the worst of all worlds, terrible for patients, and we've heard some horrific examples of DIY dentistry, but also bad for taxpayers, because if you don't get there early with dental problems and regularly maintaining your teeth and looking after them, you end up with conditions that take you to A&E, which costs an arm and a leg for the NHS to deal with in hospital. So it's bad for patients and bad for the taxpayer. And frankly, after 14 years of Conservative government promising to reform the NHS dentistry contract back in 2010, what we got today was too little too late.
Wes Streeting. Now, Downing Street has confirmed Rishi Sunak will continue to have his weekly audience with the King, but it will be conducted by phone following His Majesty's cancer diagnosis. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales has made his first public appearance since his father's condition was made public. He led an investiture ceremony today, handing out state honours such as OBEs and MBEs at Windsor Castle. Prince William's expected to carry on with further royal duties in place of the King, along with support from the Queen and Princess Anne. For the very latest news stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now let's start this hour with an update on the royals. Downing Street says that the King will hold weekly phone conversations with the Prime Minister. This comes as the monarch has travelled back to the Sandringham estate to begin treatment. Number 10 and Buckingham Palace took the unusual step of confirming details about the weekly call in an attempt to show that the King was carrying on with his duties as normal. Today, Prince William returned to royal duty after his wife's abdominal operation by conducting an investiture at Windsor Castle. And meanwhile, Prince Harry is on his lonely way back to America after his flying visit to the UK to see his father for all of 45 minutes. Well, I'm joined now by Michael Cole, former royal correspondent for the BBC, who joins me. Michael, fabulous news to start with that the King is returning to some semblance of normality and routine.
Yeah, very, very sensible indeed. He's obviously come up here to Norfolk to get away from it all. It's very important during the treatment of cancer that there is no contact with people outside the immediate family circle because infection is deadly in circumstances like that. And of course, when we think about Prince Harry, I mean, it's difficult to see what he's accomplished apart from collecting 11,000 air miles for a 45-minute meeting yesterday at Clarence House, which could have been done on the telephone or by speaking to his father like I am speaking to you in vision right now. And of course, when royal men meet each other, it's customary to greet each other by kissing each other on the cheek. Well, that would have been absolutely impossible because Prince Harry had just come off an aeroplane, 11 hours in a pressurized cigar tube at 35,000 feet, breathing the same air as 250 other people. For him to actually have hugged his father or kissed his father on the cheek would have been a complete and utter no-no. So it's difficult to see why he came and indeed why he's gone. Certainly what he hasn't been doing is speaking to his brother, who we saw admirably carrying out his royal duties today at an investiture at Windsor Castle. The contrast between the two brothers grows ever wider.
Do you think, Michael, this trip has once and for all proven something a lot of us have been thinking about, you and I have been talking about for a long time, and that is, you know, Harry's book was called Spare, and now he really is the spare proverbial in the royal family, pointless, superfluous requirements.
Yeah, well, of course, that's his choice. The King very sensibly and wisely has always made it clear that Harry is his son and is always welcome and that he loves him. So there was nothing yesterday for the King to apologise or explain during that 45-minute meeting. But I wonder if Harry took some steps, at least some steps, to mend the fences and to start apologising, because there's an awful lot to apologise. Very hurtful, very cruel allegations against not just the King, but who he said was uncaring and unemotionally involved, and also Queen Camilla and the Princess of Wales, Catherine, who now, of course, is recovering from her abdominal surgery, and our thoughts will go with her. So there's a lot to be done. Whether there's ever going to be a possibility of a reconciliation with his brother, I would rather doubt it at the moment. I think in the epic words of Muhammad Ali in another context, there are two chances of that, slim and none. And I think that's how it's going to continue until there's a very big change of heart at the Camelot in California, where they should really actually be looking at themselves, that it's taken a crisis like this, and it is a crisis within the royal family, the declaration of this cancer condition for the King, They should be thinking of themselves what really matters in life, what is important, and put the trivialities behind them. There they are, handsome, good-looking people, 2 beautiful, healthy children, more money than you can shake a stick at, people admiring them, people liking them, people giving them employment. What on earth have they got to be worried about?
Yeah, Michael Cole, I think you've hit the nail on the head. A lot of people watching this will just think, stop all the navel gazing, stop with the vanity, with the narcissism, and actually be a son. Actually do the right thing for the first time in a long time. Michael Cole, former Royal Correspondent of the BBC, thank you very much. It's always an absolute joy to have you on the show. Now, there's been some heated exchanges in the House of Commons today during Prime Minister's question time. Rishi Sunak was accused of making an offensive transgender joke by Sir Keir Starmer. The Labour leader said it was shameful as the mother of murdered teenager Brianna Ghey was in the Commons gallery. And let's hear that exchange, what was said.
Defining a woman. Although in fairness, that was only 99% of a U-turn. The list goes on, but the theme is the same, Mr. Speaker. It's empty words, broken promises, and absolutely no plan.
Of all the weeks to say that, when Brianna's mother is in this chamber, shame. Parading as a man of integrity when he's got absolutely no responsibility. Absolute.
Well, join me now in our Westminster studio to discuss this Ferrari is the newly promoted Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party and the MP for Bury North, James Daly. James, well done on your promotion. That's Lee Anderson's old job. Did they give you his suit as well?
Mr Anderson is a great man, he's a great friend of mine, and I'm just glad to be part of the Conservative team.
Good.
The fight at the next election is about taking on socialism, making sure that this country is not infected by the plague, which is socialism, which is offered by Keir Starmer, and that's the reason why I've accepted this job. OK, well, let's talk about the latest conflict today at PMQs. Now we've got Keir Starmer crying shameful, demanding an apology to Brianna Ghey's mother. What do you make of this? Well, I think I know that you weren't trying to be unfair in respect of that, but the VT that you missed out in respect to that was some of the comments the Prime Minister made about Brianna Ghey's mother, and he used the word compassionate, empathetic, and described her humanity. Now, it's a strange thing for Keir Starmer and then for this sort of, if it is a row or for, this discussion to go on, the Prime Minister could not have been more clear in terms of his respect for the family and the very admirable, caring, loving stand that Brianna's family have taken in respect to these matters. The Prime Minister, like the rest of us, respect completely what has happened, and it's just a tragic set of circumstances.
And just for the avoidance of doubt, at PMQs, would the Prime Minister know who was in the gallery or how to accordingly frame what they say, or is it simply too busy? I mean,
well, I genuinely, I don't know about that, and I don't know, I don't know who was aware of what in respect of that. But in terms of the clip that you've just seen, the Prime Minister was making a point regarding the U-turns that Keir Starmer has made, and it was nothing to do with the case that you're talking about. And as I say, the Prime Minister could not have been clearer in respect of his respect for the compassion, the empathy, and more importantly, the humanity of Brianna's mother and all of her family.
OK. Let's move on. There's a debate taking place right now in the Commons, chaired by Rachel McLean. This is a debate to deport foreign criminals. Of course, this is following in the case of Abdul Azidi. The details emerging simply in the last hour now, attempts of murder. This is the guy who'd got asylum at his third attempt by miraculously converting to Christianity, a sex offender on the sex offenders register for 10 years, 3 separate offences, pinching a woman's behind, exposing himself and performing a sex act, didn't get sent down for that, avoided jail, stayed in the country, went on to commit this horrendous act. This sort of person is precisely the shining light on the burning injustice many people feel around our broken immigration system. Is it time to deport people like Abdul Azidi?
Well, I think everybody realises the seriousness of the situation here. One of the difficulties, Martin, for somebody like me, and for yourself as well, that in terms of what happened in the court, we have an independent judiciary, we have an independent tribunal system regarding immigration panel hearings, but it does seem quite extraordinary that he was turned down twice for his immigration status in this country, but then to miraculously have the conversion to Christianity. But importantly, Martin, I think this, my colleague Tim Lawton asked a brilliant question in PMQs today. People like this are not just walking into courts and tribunals and saying, by the way, I've now turned to Christianity after all this time. They are being supported and backed by various religious organisations. And I'm really concerned when somebody like Justin Welby stands up in the House of Commons and makes comments such as the immoral stand that the government are taking in respect to trying to secure our borders. Well, some people may view it as certainly questionable. I think there are big questions for the Church of England and others to answer as to why they are supporting and accepting at face value cases like these. These are the organisations that are enabling and going into courts and saying this person has converted. You know, in most cases, it's clearly not correct.
Has it got to the stage, James, where a lot of people are asking the question, does Justin Welby, does the Church, does the Home Office, does the judiciary, do all of these institutions seem to put the human rights of asylum seekers and those coming to our country illegally before the human rights of British citizens?
Well, let's just get back to this. I'm always very wary, Martin, I don't know about you, about anybody who stands up and tries to impose their morality upon you. That you may, you know, we all have different views about things, but for Justin Welby to stand up in the House of Lords and to say the Rwanda policy is immoral, I think gives an example of the mindset of the Church of England. They don't believe clearly in robust policies to protect our borders, protect the human rights of everybody in our country. I mean, God, can you imagine if you're a Church of England, a practicing member of the Church of England, you believe in the Rwanda policy, you're immoral. They're actually calling millions of people in the country immoral. They're an organisation that clearly their mindset is to believe and to encourage people to apply for asylum in this country. Yeah. And you know, what evidence are they basing this on?
OK, James, I want to quickly ask you about another case, Valdo Colocane, of course, the triple killer sent not to a prison, but to a hospital, a psychiatric hospital, and that allows him, it's the law of the land, but nevertheless, it allows him 360 quid a month in benefits, universal credit, to spend as he sees fit when he's inside. The mother of Barnaby Webber, who was slaughtered by Colocane, said this may be the law, but we strongly suggest the law is wrong and it urgently needs to be reviewed. What's your position?
Well, another appalling and tragic case. It is being reviewed. I think Mel Stride, the Department of Work and Pension Secretary, is looking into this. There's going to be a number of reviews of the awful circumstances of what happened. In this case, the judge could have made an order to refer this gentleman back into prison after he'd received his treatment, wherever that treatment may be, and therefore he wouldn't be receiving the money in those circumstances. So there is a legal remedy, even in these circumstances, to make sure that doesn't happen. But none of us...
Surely there should be a legal remedy where even if he doesn't get moved back to a cling, if he stays in a psychiatric hospital, surely there could be dispensation to stop this guy's benefits. People are absolutely outraged about the fact not only are they paying for this killer's lodgings and his food and him to be protected for many, many years, they're now giving him pocket money.
And it's because of that I'm very glad that the government are looking at this. We have the position we have. You've accurately described the legal position. I've said what powers are open to judges. But the government, quite rightly, are looking at this. And I think many people in this country and in the House of Commons will have a great deal of sympathy for what you've just said. OK, thank you very much. James Daly, newly promoted Deputy Chair of the party and, of course, MP for Bury North. Thanks for joining us in the studio. Always a pleasure. Cheers. Now, what will you do with an extra £1,500 each month for a whole year? Well, you could win that in our Great British Giveaway, as £18,000 in cold, hard cash is up for grabs. And here's how you could make that dosh yours.
There's an incredible £18,000 in cash to be won in the latest Great British Giveaway. Totally tax-free cash that you could do whatever you like with. That works out to be an extra £1,500 to play with each month for a whole year. Money to make each month just that little bit better. You could put it towards monthly treats, save it for a rainy day, or just use it to take the pressure off in 2024. For your chance to win £18,000 in tax-free cash, Text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB02 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 23rd of February. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Good luck.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight, our author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we? How could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do. I hope you vote. I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but you're probably, if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that. They're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Now, next Monday, the Prime Minister will take part in a special People's Forum live on GB News in the northeast of England. Over the course of the hour, he'll take questions directly from you, the great British public, the only people that matter. And if you want to be there, head to gbnews.com/PM to register your interest today, or scan that QR code that you can see on your screen right now. Now, breaking news, the manhunt continues for chemical attacker Abdulazidi. This afternoon, the Metropolitan Police has confirmed this is still an incredibly high-priority attempted murder investigation, and there is a strong indication that Azidi was in a relationship with the victim. Police believe the suspect is being helped by others. Abdulazidi was, of course, last seen on Wednesday, the 31st of January at 23:03, heading into Grosvenor Road from Vauxhall Bridge Road in London. And joining us now to update us is GB News reporter Ray Addison, who's at New Scotland Yard with all the latest. Ray, lots of dramatic developments and information come out in the last hour. What's the latest?
Well, Met Police saying that they suspect the motive for the attack 7 days ago now on Wednesday could have been this relationship breaking down between Yazidi and this 31-year-old woman who remains in hospital sedated. She's been unable to speak to police. However, they've been analysing her mobile phones and carrying out investigations. And as you were saying, Martin, they do suspect that they were in a relationship, although they've been unable to give us details of exactly how close that relationship was or how they were to meet. But they're treating this case still incredibly high priority, and they told us today for the first time as attempted murder. Now, that 31-year-old obviously remains in hospital, and with the last sighting of Yazidi is from the day of the attack, Wednesday night now, but the timeline now 11 o'clock at night, crossing Vauxhall Bridge and then going on to Vauxhall Bridge Road in the direction of Grosvenor Road. Now, National Crime Agency have been taking a look at that CCTV footage that will be released later on today, and they say that based upon the images, they can see that the injuries Yazidi has suffered could potentially be fatal. The main concern being one of sepsis setting in. We interviewed Commander John Saville from the Met Police. This is what he had to say.
Significant, what appears to be burn mark on his face. Now, we have, through the NCA, been in contact with medical experts about what the impact of that will be. Clearly, without any medical intervention, that could prove to be very serious, if not fatal. Infection is an obvious thing that could possibly happen, which is why, I am appealing to Abdul that he needs to come forward to get that medical attention and to hand himself in.
Well, the Met Police saying that to the best of their knowledge, Yazidi has not received any kind of medical treatment, has not checked himself into any hospitals. However, hospitals across London remaining on high alert.
Information from there on the astonishing missing of Abdul Yazidi. A week on at 7:25 tonight, there'll be a press conference, an anniversary press conference, which in itself, if you think about it, is a pretty shameful thing to admit. Now, Gary Lineker has claimed that he was partly involved in drawing up new BBC social media guidelines, which came into force last year. The Match of the Day presenter has been criticised a number of times for expressing political views in his Twitter comments, but Lineker has described the impartiality row with the BBC as a lover's tiff. Well, join me now to discuss this, the former executive editor of the News of the World, Neil Wallace. Neil, here we go again. Lineker is writing the rules. He's marking his own homework at the BBC.
He's loving it, isn't he? He's really, really loving rubbing the nose of the BBC in what he's doing. He is simply taking it as empowering him. He clearly believes he is untouchable. He can do what he likes, say what he likes. The idea of him, as you say, claiming to have helped write the rules. And the footage you're just showing now, you look at him, he's so pleased with himself. Such an arrogant man. I do find it extraordinary that they put up with this. But it shows the lack of grip that the BBC have. It shows the lack of sort of sense of being in touch with how people are, that they allow him to get away with this. And, don't forget, he's taking 1.35, I think it is, million pounds out of licence fee payers' money. That's, your and my money. And he's just riding roughshod. And I find it staggering.
Well, Neil, he's not only writing the law, that basically puts him above the law. This latest revelation, Neil, it just says that Lineker is unsackable. He can say whatever he wants with impunity and damn the consequences.
That's the craziness about it, isn't it? He has made himself unsackable out of this, or rather, the BBC have made him unsackable. The more they've caved in, the more difficult it is to call him into line. And you see that far from having learned his lessons, he has continued to do what he likes on Twitter. He has liked a Labour MP's anti-Semitic tweets. He liked and put forward a tweet. Admittedly, he later removed it, that said how the Israeli football team was being banned. You know, this seems to me, what you can't get away from here, that there is quite a common touch in this, and that's something to do with anti-Semitism. And I think the BBC, who really have a problem with this anyway, really need to get a grip on it. And frankly, they should sack Lineker.
Yeah, Neil Wallace, I think many people listening will agree with this. Lineker is the law. He's above the law. He's unsackable. I'm afraid I think it's going to get much, much worse. Thank you for joining us, Neil Wallace. Now, we have plenty more to bring in just a moment, but first, here's your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
And the top story this evening, police searching for the suspected chemical attacker Abdulazidi, evading capture for a week now, say there's a strong indication he was previously in a relationship with the victim that had since broken down. The Met Police are also saying the attacker's injuries could prove fatal if not treated, adding they've received hundreds of calls from the public trying to locate the suspected attacker. The Met is also offering a £20,000 reward for any information leading to his arrest. He has a history of sexual assault convictions, which have prompted questions about his asylum status as well as his conversion to Christianity. He was last seen at 11 o'clock last Wednesday evening. Dentists are being offered cash incentives by the government to take on new patients in areas of dire need. The new scheme aims to make dental appointments available to around 1 million more people across England. Dentists will be offered payments of between £15 and £50 for each new patient. Hundreds of people were queuing up outside a new NHS dental practice in Bristol yesterday and today after a clinic offered to enrol new patients. And Sir Keir Starmer has accused the Prime Minister of letting parts of the country go without basic dental care in the Commons today. It comes as the government announced a new plan to boost the number of dental appointments available across England. The Labour leader said 14 years of Conservative government had seen the NHS fall into neglect. And Downing Street has confirmed Rishi Sunak will continue to have his weekly audience with the King, but it will be conducted by phone following His Majesty's cancer diagnosis. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales has made his first public appearance since his father's condition was made public. He led an investiture ceremony handing out state honours at Windsor Castle. Prince William's expected to carry out further royal duties in place of his father, along with support from the Queen and Princess Anne. For the latest stories, do sign up for GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And a quick snapshot of today's markets for you. The pound buying you $1.2623 and €1.1727. The price of gold is £1,612.92 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed for the day today at 7,628 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Polly. You are watching and listening to GB News. Coming up, we're discussing the outrage that Nottingham triple killer Valdo Colocane is entitled to claim benefits because he's being sent to a high-security hospital and not a prison. £360 a month in universal credit, and you're paying for it. This and much more to come in our bumper final part of the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney. Weekdays from 3 p.m.
Or they're trying to make it better, or they're trying to make it slower, a lot slower. Slower enough, in fact, for it to sufficiently allow the boats to start coming in to cause further political damage to Rishi Sunak.
Which it will do if it carries on.
Of course it will. And this is the Labour peers, the Lib Dem peers, and no doubt some of the Conservative wets, banding together, causing political damage to Rishi Sunak. And the longer it goes on, the worse it will be for the Conservative Party.
There's now a deadline on the Rwanda plan. It's got to start working this summer to have any electoral benefit for Rishi Sunak, because of course the election is in November. By then the costings will slow down. It's got to be up and running by about May or June, and then they'll take it from there.
Cool. And you have a crumb of comfort for us. Rishi Sunak met a Prime Minister.
Well, a crumb of comfort for those who want to stop the boats, certainly. We'll get towards it. The PM today met Alexander De Croo, who's a Belgian Prime Minister. They've agreed a UK-Belgium law enforcement cooperation agreement. In short, that is a focus on surveillance and information, ultimately, which should help stop the boats. Not many boats make crossings from Belgium, but it's the kind of, they can hopefully use law enforcement. These are the kind of deals which Sir Keir Starmer's talking about. If he becomes Prime Minister, he'll do more of these deals with countries on the continent, and this shows that the Tory PM can do them too.
And there may be intelligence sharing of crime gangs that operate within Belgium. As you say, it's a much, much further distance, much more perilous across the North Sea. Very unlikely that people will be leaving in any great numbers from Belgium. But nevertheless, is this of note, or is it a token victory against a backdrop of domestic loss?
Usually they could do it with Belgium and not do it with the European Union, because so far we've been told the returns agreements can't be agreed with individual countries because they've got the European Union to talk to. Maybe this deal can be mirrored with France, and that might help with better cooperation, because basically after Brexit we're a sovereign country. We have to work on some areas more closely with our European neighbours.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Welcome back. It's 5:38. You're watching or listening to Martin Daubney on GB News. The Prime Minister has been criticised for aiming a political jibe about transgender people at Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer during PMQs earlier today. And let's remind ourselves of that exchange once more.
Defining a woman, although in fairness that was only 99% of a U-turn. The list goes on, but the theme is the same, Mr. Speaker. It's empty words, broken promises, and absolutely no plan. Keir Starmer.
Of all the weeks to say that, when Brianna's mother is in this chamber, shame. Parading as a man of integrity when he's got absolutely no responsibility. Absolute.
So who do you think was in the wrong there? Well, joining me now to discuss this is former Labour Party spokesman James Mathewson, who always gives as good as he gets. James, thank you for joining us on the show. So an exchange suddenly becomes a huge talking point. Who do you think was in the wrong?
Well, Martin, it won't surprise you to know that I think, to say that he's in the wrong is putting it very gently, I think, from me. I'm actually furious about this, to be honest with you. This afternoon, since that's happened, I've taken the time to check in on several friends of mine who are trans, including friends who've just recently transitioned, and to hear their feelings about what was said and the way that it happened. For the most powerful person in the country to punch down on trans people, in a jibe, in a throwaway jibe, in a political exchange for political points is bad enough. To do so in front of the mother of a trans woman who was murdered You know, a young woman who was murdered, with transphobia being a key part of that murder and a key part of the reason her life was taken. It's just beyond despicable. And I think it shows at best, you know, a complete lack of comprehension or consideration for the trans community. And at worst, you know, I mean, we've got to be pretty clear what we're talking about here. Actual harmful direction of jibes and jokes and name calling at some of the most vulnerable people and some of the bravest people in our communities.
Yeah, but James, the point he was making, stripping aside, if we can, the fact that Esther Jai was in the gallery. Actually, I don't think she was. I think she was not in the gallery at the time. But putting that to one side, if we can, Rishi was making the point that Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, who could soon be the Prime Minister, seems to struggle with basically being able to define what a woman is. And it's a valid criticism. You talk about saying trans people are oppressed in this conversation. What about the most vulnerable people, for example, women in prisons, women in hospitals, women in rape crisis centres, who would be confronted by biological men if this trans ideology, which the Labour leader seems to eschew, becomes government policy?
I mean, the mention of the word trans ideology, I take great discomfort with.
You can take discomfort all you like to it, James. Answer the question. If vulnerable women are feeling like they're being attacked in prisons, then Rishi Sunak has a point. A lot of people agree with that.
Let me tell you who's been attacked. Trans people are 4 times more likely than you or I to be assaulted in this country. That's just in this country, never mind worldwide. 52% of LGBT people suffer with depression as it is. To see the most influential person, or one of the most influential people in our country, making a jibe at their expense, this wasn't about women. This wasn't about engaging in a serious way about the gender debate or trying to fix problems or tackle solutions. This was about making a joke at Keir Starmer's expense and weaponising trans people to do so. I'm endlessly proud of the trans people in my life because I'll tell you the dictionary definition of bravery. The dictionary definition of bravery is having mental or moral strength to face danger. And nobody, I think, does that more than the people in the trans community at the moment.
But James, it's also a fair point to point out that if we go down the route of allowing biological men who become transgender women into women-only spaces where they are at their most vulnerable, hospitals, changing rooms, prisons, then it is fair to point out that also it's brave to speak out against this, because if we don't, we are heading to a direction where vulnerable women could be at risk. That's the point.
But there was no debate about that. So that wasn't Rishi Sunak's point. Rishi Sunak doesn't stand up as a champion of women's rights trying to talk about that. What he said was, Keir Starmer would define what a woman is. And that's quite straightforward. It's not that simple, as we know. The discussion, to try and simplify the discussion in such a way, is cheap and pathetic. And it's beneath the office of state that he holds.
OK, do you think that Keir Starmer has now dragged a grieving mother into this debate by this? And because what's going to happen next is that Esther Jai will be probably harangued to give a statement to the media. She's grieving for the loss of her daughter, Brianna.
That would be the fault of anybody who harangues Esther Jai. The person who's dragged somebody into this was the fact that the Prime Minister doesn't have enough tact or deft to be able to not mention trans people or make a joke about trans people when literally seconds before Keir Starmer had said, we welcome to the chamber. Doesn't matter that she wasn't in the chamber at the time. She was coming into the chamber. She was on her way in, as happens in PMQs. And, to be able to not make that joke, it was very simple. And he's cleverer than that, and the people behind him are cleverer than that. So you have to ask, was this intentional? Is he playing these culture wars with the intention of those political gain? Because it's absolutely pathetic, and it's putting real people who suffer day to day and live very difficult and challenging lives, in the frame, and it's really unfair.
OK, former Labour Party spokesman James Matthewson, thank you for joining us on the show. Always have a robust debate with you. Thank you very much. Now, still to come before 6 o'clock, London Mayor Sadiq Khan is facing yet more ULEZ controversy, this time over misleading radio adverts on the effectiveness of his so-called clean air scheme. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, you know, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, you know, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. 5:48 now. We're ending today's show on a bang because London Mayor Sadiq Khan is facing yet more ULEZ controversy. The Advertising Standards Authority warned TfL, which of course is ran by the mayor, that their environmental claims surrounding the ULEZ project were misleading. Problematic promotions included ones which said inside your car is one of the most polluted places in London is inside your car, not on the curb, inside it. In response, TfL say they provided multiple reports, studies and reviews to prove this point. Well, join us now to pick this apart is the founder of Fairfuel UK, Howard Cox, a one-man dynamo on campaigning on ULEZ and shining a light. Let's start, Howard, if we can, with Sadiq Khan's claims. What did he claim and what's the truth?
Well, he's got a track record for actually telling porky pies, and he's been doing this for long enough now, and he's actually basing policy on these porky pies, and that's the problem. What he's saying is that actually the ULEZ has actually reduced the NOx, the nitrogen dioxide. He's also talking about that outside, believe it or not, outside the central London ULEZ zone, it's more polluted. And you just mentioned the fact that inside the car is more polluted. It is all tosh. It's all based on Imperial College modelling work. It's not actual data. It's real lies. And I'm sick to death of this man getting away with this, Martin. He has, you know, this is an advert they put out to say this. His press, I don't know how his press team, his media team, his propaganda team are allowed to get away with actually telling lies like this to get policy through. And guess what it happens? It's hitting the low-income families, it's hitting small businesses, all based on an ideal, a green ideal, which he is faking.
Now, Khan obviously will claim that his policy is about cleaner air and saving lives. He talked a lot about children in particular with increased asthma. But a lot of people are starting to believe that this actually is just a cash cow, a way of milking the motorist dry.
Well, absolutely, and that's what it is. And we've all heard the various statistics, like the 4,000 deaths every year. Only one person has been proven, according to the coroner, who has actually died due to poor air quality, and that was nearly 8 or 9 years ago. Very sad, one person is too much. But there's 3,999 others are not accounted for. There isn't one death certificate that says it has. But he says that. He also manipulates public consultation agreements. That's what everyone, something like 2 out of 3 people in that public consultation agreement he had last year before ULEZ expansion came into force in August the 29th, said, no, we don't want it. But he still went ahead with it.
Would Sadiq Khan ever take a public debate with somebody like you on this?
I've been writing to him for the last 5 years, even before I'm standing, as you know, as a mayoral candidate for Reform UK. Yeah. It is very sad that he can't face up to it. I mean, have you had him on your show?
No, I don't think he can't. But I think it's also fair to point out that Sadiq Khan, he wouldn't claim he's a liar. What would be claimed here is data has been put forward based on modelling, perhaps based on worst-case scenarios, based on selective sampling, and also what it's not doing is taking the background effect, of course, of vehicles just getting cleaner anyway.
You're absolutely right. In the last 10 to 15 years, particularly with HGV vehicles, by the way, they've halved their emissions in that time, but that's not the headline. You're very kind to him, and you're right to do that. I understand why you're saying
that. He's not here to defend himself. Let's not steam into him too much.
I'm sorry, I'm going to, but go on, carry on.
So let's move on to another story. And again, another conspiracy theory been proven to be true, this time installing technology on pay per mile. So that's coming down the road as well.
Absolutely right, and I'm going to be fighting that tooth and nail when I become Mayor of London. The simple fact of life is that obviously moving and being pushed into electric vehicles, the fuel duty revenues have been plummeting. Usually, it used to be about 30 billion a year was coming into the exchequer every year from fuel duty. But because more people are buying EVs, not as many as they'd like, I'm afraid, obviously, that particular taxation stream is actually drying up. And so, well, how else can we do this? OK, let's do pay per mile. And that's going to include electric vehicles too.
Of course it will, because these laws always coming in as certain vehicles are exempt. It was the Toyota Prius, that was exempt at first, the hybrid cars, then they got dragged into the tax policy. Now EVs will too. Another policy I want to talk about is something that's happened over the channel over in Paris.
I know where you're going.
The socialist mayor of Paris has also declared war on SUVs, slamming them with parking fees, however, which can be as much as, I couldn't believe my eyes, 360 quid to park an SUV for a few hours in Paris. Sadiq Khan's team saying they're eyeing the policy with interest. What does that mean? It means it's going to come to London, potentially.
Well, it's already here in Westminster. There is already a differential between diesel vehicles versus petrol for parking. It's nearly double for parking a diesel vehicle in Westminster. And they're going to do the same thing. And they're basing it on weight, which brings in the electric vehicle. And this is my point. Because, as you know, electric vehicles are very heavy vehicles. They are going to be actually penalised on this policy too, deliberately, to actually yet another cash cow route. It's nothing about green issues or improving our planet, because they're going to go for EVs as well.
OK, of course, people have got the chance to vote on this. There's a mayoral election coming up in May.
Absolutely right, and I hope they would choose me. And I'm going to get rid of ULEZ completely, LTNs, speed bumps, pinch points, lots of good things, and especially 20-mile-an-hour limits. And I promise you there'll be no pay per mile, and there won't be any differential or prejudicial parking rates just because you drive an SUV.
OK, Howard Cox, thank you very much, the founder of Fair Fuel UK, for joining us. Ulez, like all of these ideas, starts in London. The bad ideas used to start in America. Now they start here. They spread their tendrils nationwide. This will be going all over the shop. We already have a clean air zone in Birmingham. They're ripping out their car parks there. They're declaring war on the motorists. Let me know what you think in all the usual ways. Get in touch. And also, don't forget to get involved with that Prime Minister special that we're doing next Monday. I'll be back same time tomorrow, 3 till 6. But after this, it's Jubes & Co with Michelle Dewberry. Have a fantastic evening.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. Mild for the rest of today in the far south, with rain returning later on. Cold elsewhere across the UK, with further snow showers affecting the far north of Scotland overnight. Otherwise clear spells for Scotland, Northern Ireland and much of northern and central England, as well as North Wales. Temperatures falling away here overnight, but further south the cloud thickens. The wind picks up, outbreaks of rain return by dawn, heavy and persistent for some southern and southwestern parts of the UK. Rain warning force because could be some disruption early on. That rain is carried in by an Atlantic wind, and that's bringing much milder air into the south for Thursday. But as it bumps into the cold air and tracks north through the morning, mid-Wales, North Wales into the Midlands, as well as northern England, we're going to see increasingly spells of snow. Now, there'll be patchy accumulations at lower levels. Some places might not see much at all, but over hills, some significant snow, and certainly for higher parts of North Wales and northern England, the Peak District into the South Pennines, risk of significant disruption, 25 centimetres of snow above 200 or 300 metres, as well as the freezing rain risk. Now, the rain, sleet and snow pushes north through the rest of Thursday and into Friday across Northern Ireland, into northern England and southern Scotland. By this time, most of the snow will be over hills, staying dry in the far north as we end the week, but it stays cold here. Elsewhere, it's increasingly mild into the weekend, but with further rain and showers.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake,
basic-
civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
Yeah.
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each other.
Why do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, we've got a Nash's